The History of Armenia, the Chronicle series. But whatever may have been their destiny, and it has been bitter, whatever it may be in future, their country must even be one of the most interesting on the globe. And perhaps their language only requires to be more studied to become more attractive. If the scriptures are rightly understood, it was in Armenia that paradise was placed. Armenia, which has paid as dearly as the descendants of Adam. It was in Armenia that the flute first abated and the dove alighted. George Byron, the great English poet. Armenia is an ancient country, and its symbol is the holy mount of Ararat, which was first mentioned in the Bible. Many great states of the same age as Armenia have disappeared without a trace in the midst of centuries. Armenia lives despite numerous attempts to wipe it off the map, and it will live until the end of time, because the Armenian people, 5 millennia of existence behind his back, is charged with creative energy. Much has been written about the history of a small country that was the first to adopt Christianity. We will try to tell about it once again, turning the pages of this amazing book full of tragic but great pages, entitled The History of Armenia. Part 1. The settlement of ancient Armenian tribes in the Armenian Highlands. Between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, to the south of the Greater Caucasus Range, a high plateau stretches, which is geographically called the Armenian Highlands. The Armenian Highlands is the historical homeland of Armenians. It was here where the great Armenian nation has come into being and created its rich original culture. Dolmens, menhirs, cromlechs and walls of cyclopean structures, as well as the megalithic complex Zoratskarer, also known as Karaunch. All these traces of ancient civilizations have been discovered in the modern period on the territory of Armenia. A large number of megalithic structures have been discovered near mountain Agarats in the valleys around the modern cities of Oshakan, Parpi, Agts and Sisian. By the middle of the 2nd millennium BC, the population of the Armenian Highlands had achieved the phase of statehood creation. By that time, the first tribal unions, Haysa, Harme, Suhmu, Nairi, Uruatri and others began to take shape on the territory of the Armenian Highlands. The Proto-Armenian population, which was in the minority ethnically united with the Urarts, Hurrians and Luvians, who inhabited the Armenian Highlands, in the meantime retaining the basis of their language and forming the state of Hayasa. The state of Hayasa, 16th-12th century BC, united the tribes living in the territory of the Armenian Highlands. During this period, Hayasa at times made peace with the Hittite kingdom and paid tribute to the Hittites, at other times entered into military conflicts with the kingdom. By the 13th century BC, Hayasa again split up into tribes due to the seizure of its territory. The state of Urartu from the 11th century BC to the 6th century BC achieved a dominant status in the Southwest Asia. The constant threat of an external enemy, Assyria, prompted the principalities to reunify with each other into a united state. One of them was the Principality of Van, located on the shore of Lake Van. In the 859 BC, the ruler of Van Principality, Aram, declared himself sole king in the entire Ararat country. Just under this name, Urartu is mentioned in the Old Testament, and by itself the word Urartu is a distorted and mispronounced Assyrian form of the word Ararat. In 786–764 BC, King Argishti I launched a number of successful military campaigns to the country of Mana, which for a long time fell under the influence of Urartu and significantly extended the borders of Urartu in Transcaucasia. In 782 BC, King Argishti founded the city of Erebuni, modern Yerevan, the capital of present Armenia. The completion of the ethnos formation refers to the 6th century BC. The last remnants of the Urarts finally merged with the Armenian people in the 4th-2nd centuries BC. According to the prevailing hypothesis of Armenian ethnogenesis, Armenians are the successors of the physical and cultural component of the entire ancient population of the Highlands, primarily Hurrians, Urarts and Luvians, who formed the main genetic component of modern Armenians. Any people becomes a nation when it is united by its native language. Armenian language belongs to the Indo-European language family. Slavic languages, a greater part of modern European languages, as well as Iranian and the Indian languages, belongs to this family. The modern linguistics places the ancestral homeland of Indo-European languages in the Middle East. Hence, during the 6th-2nd millennium BC, the ancestors of modern Indo-European peoples outspread in several waves in all directions, contacting and mixing on the way of settlement with many other Indo-European tribes, absorbing new ethnic features and linguistic stratifications. The territory of settlement turned into the historical homeland of these people and was named after them. The same way, the Armenian Highlands became the historical homeland of the Armenian people, which was named Armenia in the official inscriptions already in the 5th century BC. The first mention of Armenia is found in the Behistun inscription of 520 BC of Darius I. Moreover, in the Babylonian version of the inscription, the country is featured as a synonym for Urartu. It was the tribal union of Hayasa, around which the final unification of all Armenian tribes into one nation has happened. Therefore, the Armenians call themselves Hay, and their country Hayastan. The neighboring nations from the south, who historically were more in contact with the tribal union Armi, named the country Armenia and the inhabitants Armenians. Just so, the great historical path of the country named Armenia begins. The formation of the Kingdom of Yervanduni. By the middle of the 6th century BC, an independent kingdom was formed in the central part of the Armenian Highlands. Its ruler, Yervand, succeeded in integrating other, smaller territories, the so-called kingdoms, into one state. The ruling dynasty is called Yervanduni after the founder. In the new united Armenian state, the leading role has already belonged to the Indo-European speaking tribes, who constitute the overwhelming ethnic majority. As a result, Indo-European Armenian language became the colloquial state language. In general, the process of formation of the Armenian nation has been completed. The new Armenian state at once came into collision with the Median Empire, being at the height of its power, and was forced to recognize its supremacy. According to the records of Greek author Xenophon, the king of Armenia retained power and eternal autonomy, but had to pay tribute due to the Median king. In 550 BC, the ruler of Persia, Cyrus, from the Achaemenid dynasty, overthrew the power of the Median king and established his rule in Iran. According to Xenophon, Armenian prince Tigranes, son of Yervand, actively supported Cyrus. After long wars, Cyrus subordinated to his power all countries and states of the Middle East, creating a vast empire. The Armenian kingdom of Yervanduni also submitted to the supreme authority of the Persian king and paid tribute due to him, maintaining self-government. The Armenian state within the Achaemenid Empire. At the beginning of the reign of Darius I, the great empire that he inherited was on the verge of disintegration. Almost all subordinate peoples rebelled against the power of Persians. However, Darius managed to suppress the rioting of vassals and preserved the empire. In commemoration of his victories, Darius I ordered to compose the famous Behistu inscription. The text, made in cuneiform on a high rock near the city of Hamadan, tells about the deeds of Darius. Among other things, it also tells that the Persian troops had succeeded in conquering rebellious Armenia only after 5 battles. For the first time, the word Armenia is officially mentioned in the Behistun inscription. To strengthen his power, King Darius I carried out administrative and financial reforms. The territory of the vast empire was divided into 20 satrapies, or provinces, where the size and procedure of payment of tribute due from each province were fixed. The territory of Armenia was a part of 2 satrapies, which paid tribute due by silver as well as by wines and thoroughbred horses, which Armenia was famous for. The Greek historian Xenophon, who passed through Armenia, characterizes it as a vast and rich country. He describes in details the villagers' dwellings, which had as if 2 floors, separate entrances for people and for cattle. Eating habits consisted of meat and dairy products, wheat and rye bread. In one of the corners of the dwelling, huge earthenware pitchers, caresses, were buried in the ground, from which wine and beer could be extracted with the help of a long reed. The campaign of Alexander the Great and Armenia. In 334 BC, the army of the great military commander Alexander the Great, or Macedonian, invaded Asia Minor. The famous East campaign to capture the Achaemenid Empire began. Having gained several victories, Alexander conquered the western part of the Persian Empire. The decisive battle took place in 331 near the village of Gavgamli, not far from the ruins of the ancient capital of Assyria, Nineveh, the territory of modern Iraq. According to the reports of ancient authors, Armenians also took part in the battle along with other Persian-controlled peoples. The rulers of both satrapies of Armenia appeared with their troops, fought on the right wing of the Persian army. The right wing pushed back the enemy and broke into the rear of Macedonians. However, the escape of the Persian king from the battlefield determined the course of the battle in favor of Alexander the Great. After taking over the Persian Empire, Alexander created a new empire, where the Greek Macedonian immigrants became the ruling elite, and Greek-style policies created by Alexander formed the economic and political basis. The Greek language became international of the time. The Greek art, religion and philosophy got widespread use, mixed with the art and beliefs of the peoples of the Middle East. The era of Hellenism began. Alexander did not start conquering Armenia. What are the reasons for such a gesture of the commander? Perhaps Armenia had not been of strategic significance for Alexander, but probably Alexander the Great called to memory an old legend heard as a child from his mentor Aristotle. The legend of the Great HAYK. In ancient times, one of the mighty titans, Bel, subjugated other titans to his power and reigned in Babylon. Only one of the titans did not want to submit: HAYK, a mighty, fair-haired knight who, having gathered his sons, grandsons and other family members, about 300 people, moved to the country of Ararat in the north and settled there. Not numerous local residents voluntarily submitted to his authority, and the country acquired its name from HAYK. The ruler's sons and grandsons spread throughout the country, giving names to regions, valleys, mountains and rivers. But Bel did not calm down and sent messengers to HAYK demanding submission to his power, but was rebuffed by a freedom-loving and proud knight. And then Bel gathered a huge army and marched against HAYK. And HAYK raised his men together to fight bravely for their land and freedom, without yielding to the superior enemy numbers. And a fierce battle started, killing many knights from both sides. Bel, being frightened, decided to move back to wait for a reinforcement. But HAYK broke through the ranks of the warriors, drew his bow and shot an arrow. The arrow, fired by the knight's powerful hand, pierced Bel's armor and knocked him down dead. Seeing this, Bel's companion in arms retreated in fear, and HAYK and his descendants defended their freedom. After the Battle of Gaugamela, Armenia, practically freeing from the Persian rule, gained the independence. The satraps of the dynasty of Yervanduni became full kings. The city of Armavir became the capital of Great Armenia. The restoration of independence promoted the development of the economic life of the country, but the Greek language and Hellenistic culture gained a certain cultivation. After the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC, a long struggle for power developed between his commanders. On the ruins of Alexander's empire, several Hellenistic states subsequently emerged, the largest of which was the Seleucid state, stretched from Asia Minor and Syria to India. The Seleucid state, directly bordering Armenia, repeatedly tried to conquer the Armenian kingdoms to the new power. Finally, in 201, the king of Seleucids, Antiochus III, succeeded in conquering the dispersed Armenian kingdoms, turning them into satrapies of the Seleucid state. Antiochus appointed Artaxerxes as the ruler of Great Armenia and Zerech as the ruler of Sophene, the southwestern region of Armenia, who originated from the Yervanduni dynasty. Artaxerxes' reign was marked by many positive events for the Armenian people. The foundation of new capital, Artashat, in 180 BC became an important event. According to Plutarch's writings, the place and methods of building were chosen according to the type of Carthage. In Roman historiography, the city was called Armenian Carthage. Despite the fact that Armenia for some time was under the reign of Seleucids, after almost a centennial period of its independence, their other times had come. The times of the empire of King Tigran the Great. The empire of Tigran II the Great, Armenia from sea to sea. In 9555 BC, the Armenian state entered the period of its utmost power, Armenia from sea to sea. This is how contemporaries talked of the Armenian Empire. Tigran II, the King of Kings, has created his great country. He ascended to the Armenian throne at a propitious moment. The Roman power in Asia Minor was severely undermined by the military victories of Mithridates Eupator, the king of Pontus, who consolidated his power over the entire region of the Black Sea and threatened to expel totally the Romans from Asia. In Syria, the Seleucid dynasty was on the verge of anarchy and collapse. In Parthia, a turmoil began after the death of Mithridates II, but all that will happen much later. A long captivity preceded the glorification of the greatest of all kings. Born about 140 BC, he spent his youth as a hostage at the court of King Mithridates II of Parthia, who inflicted a severe defeat on Armenians in 105 BC. His father, Tigran I, lost that war. In 95, after his death, the royal throne has been vacated. The prince bought his freedom from the Parthians, giving them 70 fertile valleys in the area of modern northeast Iran. Having gained his freedom and became a king, Tigran turned to be an active ruler, a talented commander and a diplomat. He sought to strengthen Armenia's international position and its economic condition by taking control of the international trade routes and the transit trade between West and East. But primarily, Tigran II intended to complete the consolidation of Armenian lands, which was initiated by his grandfather Artaxerxes I. The creation of the Great Empire, the first military campaigns. In 94 BC, Tigran II captured the Armenian kingdom of Sophene and integrated it with Armenia the Great. Then he aspired to annex Armenia Minor, which was under the rule of Pontic king Mithridates II Eupator. However, Mithridates offered him an alliance against neighboring states, which was sealed by the marriage bond of Tigran II and Mithridates' daughter Cleopatra. In 93 BC, Tigran II launched a military campaign against Cappadocia. Cappadocian king Ariobarzanes I immediately fled to Rome, and Tigran appointed King Gordius to his post. After the campaign to Cappadocia, Tigran decided to expand his kingdom at the expense of neighboring Caucasian regions. In 91-87 BC, the nearby territories of Iberia and Caucasian Albania were merged in Armenia. Having strengthened the rear in this way, Tigran II launched a military campaign against Parthia, Armenians' long-standing rival. The conquest of the Parthians. In 88 BC, Tigran started a successful war in the east against King Gotar II of Parthia. First of all, he recaptured the lands from the Parthians, which has been ceded to them as a ransom for his liberation. For the peoples of the Middle East, Tigran II was the most powerful among all rulers. In 83 BC, Tigran seized the last Seleucid domain, Syria and Cilicia. Then the Armenian troops continued their offensive in the southern direction. Taking over Lebanon, Phoenicia, they approached the borders of Palestine. Thus, the borders of his power reached the Mediterranean Sea. The pinnacle of the imperial political activity of Tigran the Great was the occupation and annexation of Judea, Palestine and Nabatea. According to Armenian and Jewish sources, Tigran II, having occupied the kingdom of Israel, took a lot of Jews prisoner. King deported 10,000 of them to Armenia and settled them in large cities and villages. Such wise, the Armenian king not only united all the Armenian lands for the first time, but also created a sprawling empire, Great Armenia, which was a power whose borders in the 70s BC stretched from the Kura to the Jordan and from the Mediterranean Sea to the Caspian Sea. Both domestic and foreign trade was rapidly developing in the country. Coins of different denomination were being minted in order to support and expand the trade. Many of those coins are extant, so that we have a veridical portrait of Tigran II. The foundation of the city of Tigran in 77 BC and the policy of propagating and developing the Hellenism and the Hellenistic culture in Armenia may be considered to be the major achievements of Tigran. Having ensured the organization structure of his kingdom, Tigran began to build a new capital, Tigran. The city was surrounded by a wall 50 cubits high, which was so wide that stables for horses were built inside it. The royal palace was in the suburbs, not far from the city walls, surrounded by hunting parks and ponds for fishing. Moreover, a heavily fortified castle was constructed nearby. In the Annals, Tacitus describes Tigran as a city provided with numerous defenders and strong walls. Plutarch also adds that Tigran abounded with treasures and expensive offerings to the gods because individuals and rulers vying with each other expanded and decorated the city, wishing to please the king. In addition, the great king founded 6 cities more, which have their own name, one of them in the province of Artsakh. The Roman-Armenian War, the campaign of Lucullus and the Battle of Tigran. The strengthening of the power of Tigran II contradicted the interests of the Roman Empire, which sought to consolidate its position in the Middle East. Roman commander Lucullus sent there defeated the troops of Mithridates VI Eupator, father-in-law and ally of Tigran II, and captured the kingdom of Pontus. Mithridates himself found a shelter in Armenia. Lucullus sent envoys to Tigran with a demand to extradite Mithridates, but was refused. That supplied a convenient excuse for the Romans to start the war with Tigran II. In spring of 69 BC, Roman commander Lucullus, at high-speed march through Cappadocia, crossed the Euphrates and approached Tigran. The gods of Tigran successfully repulsed the attack of Lucullus. Tigran went to collect the army in regions of Armenia, having left a strong garrison in Tigran. By itself, the battle with the Romans took place on 6 October 69 near Tigran. Initially, the fight was equal. However, the Roman cavalry, camouflaged by Lucullus, decisively attacked the numerous but rather motley troops of Tigrans. After that, the enormous multi-tribal forces of the Armenian king made a hasty retreat. Lucullus failed in a bid to take the city itself by storm. The gates of the capital of the Great Armenia have been treacherously opened by Greek mercenaries based in Tigran. As a result, the great and rich city became a prey for the Romans and was pillaged. The Hellenistic authors cite the data that testified to the great wealth of the Armenian capital. That richness allowed Lucullus to hold in the future the famous Lucullus feasts, striking the imagination of contemporaries. The campaign against the Romans in Asia Minor. Being encouraged by the victory, Lucullus set out to conquer the Armenian Carthage, Artaxate. The Battle of Artaxate took place in 68 BC. The result of the battle is variously estimated by historians. Some ancient authors report of the victory of the Romans, but Lucullus has failed to occupy the Artaxate. With the onset of winter, Tigran and his ally Mithridates strike at extended communications of enemy and force the Roman army out of Armenia. Having expelled the enemy, the old Armenian monarch makes a new, devastating campaign in Asia Minor, defeating the Roman army of commanders Fabius and Triarus. Plutarch reports that more than 7,000 Romans were slain in the battle, including 150 centurions and 24 military tribunes. The confrontation of Tigran II with Rome and Parthia. Meanwhile, availing themselves of the Armenian-Roman War, the Parthians, incited by Rome, retaliated against the supremacy of Armenia. Tigrans again cut their troops to pieces and took them to fly. The situation seemed to play in favor of Tigrans. However, in 66 BC, new Roman general Gnaeus Pompey the Great led a 50,000-strong army into Armenia soon after the younger son of Tigran II rebelled against his father, asked him for help. Mithridates was finally defeated by the Romans and fled to the Bosporan kingdom. Tigran II was unable to wage a war against two powerful powers at once, Rome and Parthia. In this regard, the Armenian king had to sign a treaty with Pompey in 66 BC, according to which Tigrans retained only the Armenian Highlands and a part of the land seized from Parthia. In addition, he received the eastern part of Armenia Minor, having been in the possession of Mithridates VI. Syria, Commagene and Cilicia fell under the Roman reign. Tigran II paid 6,000 talents of indemnity, retained the King of Kings title and was proclaimed a friend and ally of Roman people. Why did Tigrans make these concessions? This decision may be explained first of all from the patriotic viewpoint of the king. He maintained a strong army and had once defeated the Romans. But however, at the same time, Tigran's ally, the kingdom of Pontus, lost away and dropped out of the fight. And if Armenia had carried on the war, it could have remained alone against the whole world. Tigran could continue the war for the sake of his glory, but by so doing he would jeopardize the future of his country. In the choice between the glory of the king and the future of his homeland, Tigran the Great has chosen his homeland. The personality of Tigran and his historical significance. After being defeated by Rome and Parthia in the struggle for the world power status, Armenia nevertheless has long remained a strong state. The last 10 years of the reign of Tigran II were peaceful. Due to his elderly age, in those years, his son, the future king of Armenia, Artavast, assisted him in reigning. Tigran the Great died in 55 BC at the age of 85. One of the most prominent Romans, Cicero, in his speech in the Senate, spoke of Tigran in high terms vehemence, the highest credit the Romans could give a politician. Roman historiographer Veli Paterculus, who lived some later, has designated Tigran as the most powerful king of his day. The personality of King Tigran, the most powerful among the Armenian kings, nicknamed the Great, worried the minds of more than one generation of politicians, poets, artists and musicians. The folk legends about Tigran the Great, passed on by word of mouth throughout the Armenian community, have reached the era of Movses Khonenatsi, who 6 centuries later will write about him. Let us tell of Tigran and his deeds now. He surpassed all our kings in his supreme authority and rationality, and was vastly superior in his courage not only to these men, but to the others. By being the leader of the men, he exalted our people and turned us from the conquered under the yoke into those who are able to impose yokes upon many who had previously compelled us to pay tribute due to them. The peacemaker and the creator, Tigran fed all ages with honey and holy oil. Being an outstanding reformist and statesman, he devoted his life to the only goal: to strengthen the security and safeguard the independence of the state of Armenia. Owing to his reforms, Armenia became a Middle Eastern empire, and the definition from sea to sea left an indelible mark in the memory and language of grateful descendants. The heritage of Tigran the Great in the history of Armenia is steeped with the fame ancestors and the great responsibility for it. The peak of the political power of Armenia has been passed. A new geopolitical situation began to develop about Armenia. The country was caught in the middle of the collision of interests between Rome and Parthia. Armenia, the first Christian state in the history of the world. After the death of Tigran the Great in 55 BC, an almost century-old struggle for Armenia began between Rome and Parthia. As this struggle did not reveal a winner, Armenia had to remain loyal to both powers. Therefore, a Parthian prince from the Arshakuni dynasty, who was approved by the Roman emperor, henceforth was to become acting Armenian king. The first sovereign ruler of Armenia was Tiridates I, the brother of the king of Parthia. In 64 AD, after the defeat of the Roman army by the Armenian and Parthian troops in the town of Randia, the Treaty of Randia was signed, according to which Rome recognized Tiridates I as the first sovereign of Armenia, provided that he would be crowned by the emperor in Rome. Tiridates and his 3,000th retinue went to Rome, when he was triumphantly met by Nero. The emperor received the Armenian king with honor, holding festival and gladiatorial battles for him. After the ceremony, Nero let Tiridates go with the gifts and sent masters with him to Armenia, who built a small splendid temple in the king's summer residence, the Garni fortress. The pagan period of the history of Armenia. Already at the end of the Stone Age, ancient Armenians had religious ideas. Rock carvings of the 7-5 millennium BC, found in the mountains of the Armenian Highlands, tells about the everyday life of primitive hunters, the birth of ideas about the influence of supernatural powers. An ancient observatory found near the village of Karaunch, beginning of the 2nd millennium, similar to the English Stonehenge, and a rock map of the starry sky discovered in the village of Metsamor, middle of the 2nd millennium, indicate that even then there was a certain idea of the influence of celestial bodies to the circle of terrestrial life. Since prehistoric times, the cult of Vishaps, dragons, associated with the water principle, has been widespread in Armenia. Their images in the form of a stonefish were placed near springs and channels. The supreme deity of the ancient Armenian pantheon was originally the Armenian eponym HAYK, god of hunting. The native name of Armenians, Hay, took origin from his name. In years ahead, Arehak Ararich became the supreme deity personifying the life-giving sun. God Tork Angeh was the lord of elemental natural forces. God Ara personified withering and revival of nature. Asthik was the embodiment of love and fertility. The goddess Anahit was regarded as the mother patroness of the Armenian land. the goddess of fertility and motherhood and the inspirer of good beginnings. God Va'agn was revered as god of war, thunder and lightnings. He was the defender of the Armenian land, fighting against the Wiships, killing them with his lightnings. The goddess of love, HAYK, was his beloved. He returned to her after his hard victories. The biggest holiday, Navasart, was dedicated to the mother patroness of the Armenian land, Anahit. The holiday, dedicated to harvesting and ripening of grapes, lasted about 2 weeks. Competitions and horse jousts were held. On August 11, Amanor, the new year according to the Armenian calendar, was celebrated. The king performed a ritual hunting and finished the holiday with a treat. Meanwhile, the change of ruling dynasty in Persia has happened. The ruler of the Fars region, Ardashir, son of Sasan, rebelled against the Parthian Artsakuni dynasty. The Sassanid dynasty began to rule in Iran. Parthian princes and many representatives of the Parthian grandees moved to Armenia, having received hereditary land demands. The Armenian king actively supported the attempts of the dethroned Parthian Arshakids to restore their power in Persia. Due to this reason, the Sassanid dynasty primarily became Armenia's deadly enemy. A conspiracy was hatched against the Armenian king Khosrov II, resulted in assassinating the king. The last order of the dying king was to trace and kill all those involved in the regicide. At this time, the killer's wife manages to escape to Rome and saves her baby. The Persian king, with the aim of seizing the Armenian throne, ordered the assassination of Khosrov. The situation becomes dangerous and the threat falls on the entire royal family. It was necessary to save the son of the king, and he was also taken to Rome. The king's son was called Tiridates, and the son of the king's assassin was Gregory. Ironically, both of them were hidden in Rome. Many years later, they will baptize the Armenian people together. As he grows older, Gregory begins to perceive his father's vice. He realizes that the murder of King Khosrov was a great sin and devastating event for Armenia. As a sign of atonement for his father's guilt, he comes to serve the son of the late king, Tiridates, who, however, did not even assume that Gregory was the son of the assassin. Gregory serves sincerely and wholeheartedly. He becomes the most faithful servant and close friend of Tiridates. And despite the fact that Gregory has already been follower of Christianity, but the young prince hated Christians, the latter loved his servant with all his heart and shared with him the inmost secrets. And then, in 287, the Roman Emperor Diocletian sends Tiridates to Armenia with a large army. Tiridates drives the Persians, who established their power, out of the country and becomes the king of Armenia. Armenian Army Regulations, Zoranamak. The glory of the Armenian army resounded through all the Middle East. Byzantine emperors and Persian kings admired it and tried to have it in their service. The army consisted of the royal corps and armed forces. The number of troops during the war reached 100,000. A special document, Zoranamak, was created, a list of all feudal owners of Armenia, which determined the order of their vassal military service and the number of soldiers that the prince must to arm and bring with him at the call-up of the king. The army was divided into 4 wings with respect to the cardinal directions. Each wing was commanded by one of 4 deputies parapet, commander-in-chief, a special battle captain commanded by the king's corps. The striking force of the army was the famous Armenian cavalry. In wartime, regiments were formed from urban and rural population. Other times were coming. The adoption of Christianity in Armenia is one of the most amazing events in the world history. Besides the fact that the adoption of Christianity was unprecedented, it was also the only case when the change of religion took place without a change of power, as well as without the influence of a more powerful culture. The mighty and cruel King Tiridates III persecuted Christians in every possible way, killed them with bloodthirstiness, imposed the most heartless and brutal punishments and did not allow religion to spread in any way. And so, the same King Tiridates, glorified as a firm and powerful ruler, recognizes Christianity and orders to spread the religion throughout the country. The question of what happened to the king is answered by a dramatic and extraordinary extant story. Christianity is the beginning of all beginnings. King Tiridates could not accept the fact that his friend Gregory is a Christian, and at one of the pagan ceremonies he orders him to pay honors to the pagan goddess. Gregory naturally refuses, as he was very devoted to his faith, for which the king subjected him to the torments and tortures in order to renounce Christianity. Of course, the king had no intention of killing his best friend, but at this very time he is informed that Gregory turned to be the son of the regicide. Then Tiridate no longer restrains his rage and throws Gregory into the dungeon of Horvirab, where the most malicious enemies of the state were thrown. This dungeon was a deep pit where prisoners were neither fed nor watered, but simply dragged out dead after a month or two, when it was already the turn of another prisoner. The angry king issues two decrees. The first decree commands to arrest all Christians within Armenia with the confiscation of their property, and the second one commands to inflict death penalty of those who conceal Christians. During these years, according to the legend, a group of Christian girls originally from Rome, hiding from the persecution of Emperor Diocletian, fled to the east and found shelter nearby the Armenian capital Vagar-Shapat. King Tiridates, fascinated by the beauty of the Virgin Ripsime, wished to take her as his wife, but met with desperate resistance, for which he ordered all the girls to be martyred. Ripsime with 32 friends died, and only one of the maidens, Nun, managed to escape to Georgia, when she continued to preach Christianity and was later canonized under the name of equal to the apostles Saint Nino. Since then, 13 years have passed, and the king got sick with an incurable disease. The king's sister remembers that Tiridate has a devoted servant who was always there for him in difficult situations and often even helped him out. She immediately sends people for Gregory. At first, it seemed to everyone that she went mad, as it was extremely unrealistic that in a dungeon when people could not stand even a month, Gregory was alive after 13 years of imprisonment. But she insisted to check the dungeon, and after it had been done, a fear hung upon everyone from the miracle they saw. Gregory was alive. All exhausted and hardly breathing, Gregory lay on the ground. Later, it became known that one of the female employees of the prison through the chimney lowered him bread and water. Gregory is told what fate his king suffered and why he was released. Despite the fact that he had the right to hold grudges against the king, he still shows his devotion and cures Tiridates. After that, the king recognizes Christianity and orders that religion be spread throughout the country, and Gregory becomes the first Catholicos Patriarch of Armenia. To be consecrated a bishop, Gregory the Illuminator solemnly went to Caesarea, where he was ordained by the Cappadocian bishops headed by Leontius of Caesarea. The bishop of Sebastia, Peter, performed the rite of episcopal enthronement of Gregory in Armenia. King Tiridates, along with the whole court and princes, was baptized by Gregory the Illuminator and put the most efforts to revive and spread Christianity throughout the country, so that paganism could never return. The beginning of this was launched with the construction of the XIII-XVIII cathedral. According to the legend, Saint Gregory the Illuminator had a vision. Heaven was opened, a ray of light came down from it, preceded by a host of angels, and in a ray of light, Christ descended from heaven and struck the underground pagan temple with a hammer, showing where the Christian church should be built. This pagan shrine had been destroyed and buried, and the cathedral was erected on its place. Just so, the spiritual center of Armenian Apostolic Church was founded, named Holy XIII-XVIII, which translates to the descent of the only begotten. Of course, the change of religion was not particularly sudden. After Christ's resurrection, 2 of 12 apostles, Thaddeus and Bartholomew, came to Armenia. That is why the Armenian Church is called the Apostolic Church, as a sign that Armenians have heard about Christian doctrine from the apostles themselves. But the Christianity was born in Armenia yet in the lifetime of Christ. Historians mention the first Christian king Abgar, king of Edessia, a separate Armenian kingdom, who believed that the works of Christ are the works of God, and wrote a letter to Christ with a request and invitation to his kingdom to save his people. To this, Christ promised that he would send his disciple to him. Thus, since the 1st century, Christianity has been penetrating into Armenia. At the end of the 3rd century, Christian communities already existed throughout the country, which laid the groundwork for the proclamation of a new religion as the main one. Also, the biblical teaching were very close to the Armenian mentality, national customs and family traditions. Thus, the people were morally prepared to accept the new faith. It is difficult to overestimate the role of the Church in the history of the Armenian people. At the time of loss of statehood, the Church took over the leadership of the country and preserved the unity of the people. It was the Church that often organized liberation wars, established important diplomatic relations. It opened schools and universities, brought up national consciousness and patriotic spirit in the population. Having passed through severe trials, endured constant pressure from the cruel invaders of another faith, the Armenian Church has not lost the status of the state religion even for a single day. Today, the Armenian Apostolic Church unites Armenian living abroad, which equals 80% of the total Armenian population in the world. By adopting Christianity, Armenia refuses cultural influence of powerful neighbors and takes the path of creating its own independent culture. Already in 100 years, Armenians have their own writing, and the age of the exceptional development of historiography and literature, known as the Golden Age of Armenia, is coming. Mesrop Mashtots and the Golden Age. Armenia in the 6th century. In 301, a landmark event took place in Armenia. Christianity was recognized as a state religion. This will further affect the entire course of historical events of the country, which will have to endure the hardest trials. It is Christianity that will trigger the creation of writing and, as a result, the development of national culture and literature. But this will happen in 100 years. And now the country was entering a period of feudal fragmentation, and the central power, the absolute power of the kings, monarchs, began to weaken. King Khosrov III still managed to keep large Naharars in subjection. In order to stop disobedience, he demanded their families to live permanently in the cities as hostages. The king built the city of Dvin and moved the capital there from Artashat. Not far from new capital, he ordered to plant an artificial forest where animals were released for royal hunting and entertainment. The Khosrov Forest Reserve still exists today. Under the king Tigran, the troops of the Persian king Shapur II, defeating the Romans, invaded the Roman-allied Armenia and devastated the southern regions of the country. Then Shapur summoned the king Tigran to his presence, ostensibly to make peace, and blinded him. Tigran's son Arshak II successfully fought against destructive processes for some time. To strengthen central power, he conceived to found new cities. However, the Naharars, dissatisfied with the policy of strengthening the central power, openly raised a rebellion and destroyed a city that was already under construction. Arshak II was able to suppress the mutiny. Then Shapur, now by deception, summoned Arshak II and, instead of signing a peace treaty, concluded him in the fortress. Historian Faustos Busant of the 5th century brought us the legendary information about these events. Before receiving the Armenian king, Shapur ordered to sprinkle part of his palace garden with the soil specially brought from Armenia. During the promenade with Arshak in the garden while they were treading on Persian soil, Arshak swore to be loyal to the Persian king. But as soon as they entered the part of the garden filled with Armenian soil, Arshak began to behave rebelliously and independently. Thus, insidious Shapur was convinced that after returning to Armenia, Arshak would still strive for independence. Troops of Shapur II again devastated Armenia, destroying the cities, the mainstay of the central power of the Armenian kings, and taking away tens of thousands of craftsmen. After 11 months of siege, the Persians seized the fortress of Artajas and put the queen Parazem to martyrdom. Armenia was under Persian domination for several years, until patriotic forces united around Pap, the heir to the Armenian throne, using the support of Roman troops, defeated and expelled Persian troops from the country. The first partition of Armenia. King Pap, after his accession to the throne, began to implement reforms to strengthen the central power and the national defense capabilities. That again caused a discontent to feudal nobility. The so-religionist Roman Empire, acting as the so-called ally of Armenia, practically also sought to weaken the power of Pap. By secret order of the emperor, the commander of the Roman troops invited the Armenian king to the feast and traitorously killed him. And immediately Rome put his ordinand Varasdat on the Armenian throne. He originated from the side branch of the Arshakuni dynasty that had long moved to Constantinople and was the champion of the Olympic Games. Alien to everything Armenian, he could not establish himself in Armenia and was expelled by supporters of strengthening the state who proclaimed the King Pap's youngest son kings. When, after the described events, the central power in Armenia finally weakened, Persia and the Roman Empire came to an agreement and in 387 made the first partition of Armenia. 1/3 went under the rule of Rome, 2/3 under the rule of Persia. Formally, both parts of Armenia retained the royal power of the kings from the Arshakuni dynasty. The creation of the Armenian alphabet. After the partition of Armenia, it became clear that the Armenian people is threatened not only by the loss of statehood, but also by physical dissolution. Although Christianity in Armenia had already been the state religion for 100 years, centuries-old pagan beliefs and traditions were still deeply rooted in the country. Armenian priests needed the holy scripture and spiritual literature written in their own language. In a word, the creation of their own alphabet became a vital necessity. The scholar-monk Mesrop Mashtots became the guide of the divine providence. Mesrop Mashtots was born in 361 in a noble family in the village of HAYK in Taron province near Lake Van. He studied Greek, Syriac and Persian languages. Arriving at the royal court of Arshakuni in Bagashapad, he was a scribe and executor of the king's orders. There, for the first time, he devoted himself to reading the divine scriptures and, obeying the dictates of the faith, he joined the ranks of the hermits, becoming a preacher of the gospel among the pagans. Since the Armenian state was divided into two unequal parts, all the divine services in the temples were conducted in Greek in Western Armenia and in Syriac in Eastern Armenia. Mashtots interpreted the Bible for the people so that they could understand what was being said during the service. This state of affairs depressed the monk, and he understood the threat of assimilation and loss of language for both parts of the country. The best solution might have been to create an Armenian alphabet for translating the Bible. According to a legend, Mashtots had a dream in which he saw a divine predestination. With these thoughts, he turned to the head of the Armenian Church, Bishop Sahak Partev, who warmly supported Mashtots and convened a church council that blessed them for creating the alphabet. They started their truly titanic work by searching for an ancient Armenian alphabet, because they knew about the existence of certain characters known as the Daniel characters. After their unsuccessful search, they turned to the Armenian king Ramshapur for help. The king said that he had heard of a Syrian bishop named Daniel who found a set of Armenian alphabet characters. Soon, the scripts were delivered to the king. Mashtots was awarded the title of Vardapet and spent 2 years trying to teach these characters to his students. Soon he realized that these letters were insufficient to express all the syllabi and sounds of the Armenian speech. Then Mashtots, with the king's commandment and the bishop's consent, went to Edessa, a city in Syria, where the largest book depository in the east was located, to create the missing letters. He divided his disciples into 2 groups. One group he sent to Greece, the city of Samosata, to learn Greek, and the other left in Edessa to learn Syriac. Mashtots himself also stayed in Edessa, where he studied the alphabets of different languages. That helped him to invent the original 36-character Armenian alphabet, which accurately reproduced the entire phonetic of the Armenian language. Mashtots arranged the letters according to the letters of the Greek alphabet, and with the help of a Greek calligrapher named Rufanos, finalized the letters. This historical event took place in Edessa between 405 and 406. It was there that Mashtots began to translate the Bible, which began with Solomon's Book of Proverbs, to know wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, the first words written in Mashtots' letters. There are also legends that give the story of the creation of the alphabet a sacred meaning. One of the oldest legends says that Mashtots and Sahak secluded themselves in caves for 40 days to invent the alphabet. During the night, vision the angel showed them 7 letters of the Armenian alphabet on the stone. Having received the desirable results, they climbed down the mountains. The fact that the Armenian alphabet, Haybuben, is actually a prayer, which begins with the word Ararich, Creator, and ends with the word Christosi, Christ, also speaks about the divine providence in the alphabet. And the initial words of the alphabet are remembered as a melody: Ararich, Bovandak, Goyutans, Datavor, Yerknits, Zoravor, and so on. The Creator of all things, the Judge of Heaven Almighty. Doesn't this account for the selfless commitment of the Armenian people to Christianity, which, in the words of Catholicos Garigin I, is like the color of the skin for Armenians, and it can't be thrown off or changed like clothes? After all, a child who teaches the native alphabet by heart actually prays. Mashtots and his disciples returned to Armenia with triumph, where he immediately began to open schools, where he and his disciples taught new literacy, engaged in translations, and preached Christianity. Mesrop Mashtots became the first Armenian teacher. Among his first followers were all the nobles of Eastern Armenia. And finally, the main work was completed. What the alphabet was originally created for became a reality. Between 432–435, Mashtots, together with Catholicos Sahak and his disciples in Ashtishat, completed the translation of the Bible. In addition to biblical books, many works of ancient authors were translated, in particular Ecclesiasticus by Eusebius Pamphilus and other texts. And at this time, our desired and gracious country of Armenia has become certainly wonderful, where unexpectedly, thanks to 2 equal men, a law teacher Moses, along with a host of prophets, and Paul, who marched ahead with a whole group of the apostles and with the life-giving gospel of Christ, arrived and began to speak in Armenian. From the notes by Horenatsi, a disciple of Mashtots. The golden age of Armenian writing begins. In parallel with the translation of ancient and oriental books, the creation of its own original literature of different genres, theological, moral, and historical, was in process. The earliest monuments in the Armenian alphabet have reached our time in the form of manuscripts, fragments, and church inscriptions, dating back to the second half of 5th century. Also, early monuments of Armenian writings were found in Nazareth and Sinai, It is surprising that for more than 1,600 years of life, the Armenian alphabet, one of the oldest in the world, has not undergone significant changes. In the word historical science, the point of view based on the Armenian primary sources of 5th-7th centuries, according to which the creator of the first Georgian alphabet, Mrglovani, is also Mesrop Mashtots, is widely spread. The hypothesis of the creation of the Georgian alphabet by Mashtots is supported by major encyclopedias and academic scholars, in particular by academician Nikolai Mar in his article on the unity of tasks of Armenian-Georgian philology, where he noted the great similarity of the ancient Armenian alphabet and the Georgian church script Hutsuri. In the closing stages of his activity, Mashtots was alone. Having dedicated 45 years of preaching Christianity and 35 years of dissemination of the Armenian writing, he died after a short illness in the town of Vagarshapat and was honorably buried in the village of Oshakan, where a church was built on the grave in 443. Later, he and XIII-XVIII were beatified. The writing created by Mesrop became one of the cornerstones of the Armenian Church, which had a huge spiritual influence on the Armenian people. It is the wide dissemination of Christianity that will become the ground for future liberation and national religious wars. The Armenians will stand up for their faith and openly oppose the Persian domination by going to the Battle of Avarir. Struggle for faith. In 428, in the Persian part of Armenia, royal power was abolished. The same happened earlier in the Roman part of Armenia. Armenia became a region of the Persian power, which was governed by the ruler called Marzipan, appointed by the king. However, so far neither Rome nor Persia attempted to restrict the religious freedom or the rights of the Naharars, many of whom retained their hereditary positions. But by the middle of 5th century, the Persian king demanded the Armenians to refuse Christianity and accept Zoroastrian religion. The Persian leadership feared that in case of a war with Byzantium, Armenia might rebel and help the so religionist empire. The Armenians refused to accept a religion alien to them. Then the Persian king decided to introduce Zoroastrianism forcibly. An army was sent to Armenia. The whole country has stood up for its faith. The uprising was led by Sparapet Vardan Mamikoyan. Byzantium promised to support the faith allies. On May 26, 451, a decisive battle took place on the Avarir field. The Byzantine Empire betrayed Armenians, and Persians, having superior forces, won. Vardan Mamikoyan died in the battle. Despite the military superiority, the Persian authorities failed to impose Zoroastrianism, and in 481 the Armenians rebelled again. The rebels were led by Vahan Mamikoyan. As a result, the Armenians not only defended their faith, but also achieved that Persia recognized the self-government of Armenia. Since then, all public offices have been held by Armenian Naharars by the right of succession. They elected Tanuther, and the Persian king adopted or rejected his candidacy. Thus, Christianity, which had been widely introduced to the masses by means of the national writing, actually became the state religion. The Armenian nation acquires a spiritual strength built on three cornerstones: family, language, and faith in God. The flourishing of culture in medieval Armenia. The struggle of Armenia against the Arab domination. The creation of the Armenian alphabet and written word by Mesrop Mashtots and XIII-XVIII in 406 unlocked a huge literary and cultural potential accumulated in the form of oral Armenian epics and recordings in other languages. During this period, a whole galaxy of talented authors appeared: writers, translators, historians, philosophers. Classical translations of many canonical works of fathers of the Church were made. It is not a coincidence that the Armenian translation of the Bible is considered one of the closest to the original. The works of Movses Horanatsi, the father of the Armenian historiography, who created the comprehensive history of Armenia, biographer of Mesrop Mashtots Koryun, historian and philosopher Vavstos Byuzant, and of many other authors, are invaluable as the evidence of the world's early Christian culture, many of which have been translated into modern European languages. During this period, the development of Armenian Christian architecture begins. Its best monument is the Cathedral of the Descent of the Only Begotten God, erected on the site of a pagan temple in Vagarshapad, modern Echmiadzin, in 303, which is the oldest functioning church in Armenia and in the world. The sciences also developed rapidly. The country was on the rise. But the geopolitical position of Armenia, located between the millstones of hostile states, plunged the Armenian people into new historical upheavals. The Arab Caliphate, formed at the beginning of 7th century, immediately began an aggressive policy of seizing the neighboring countries. Arabs first invaded Armenia in 640 and plundered the capital Dvin. In 703, the powerful Arab army invaded Armenia again, devastating everything on its way. Flourishing cities were plundered, churches were destroyed, fortresses were seized, the population was slaughtered or driven into slavery. Having seized Armenia and all Transcaucasia, the Arabs formed a viceroyalty, Armenia, subject to caliphate, with the center in the capital of Armenia, the city of Dvin. In order to consolidate their power, the Arabs began to move Muslim tribes to Armenia and had seriously changed the ethnic composition of the country's population. Because of the constant oppression and economic difficulties, the Armenian population gradually left the country and moved to the Roman Empire. Many Naharars dynasties ceased to exist, and some moved to Byzantium. The Armenian people did not reconcile and rebelled against the Arab yoke many times. The first anti-Arab revolt of 703 was led by Sambat Bagratuni, who managed to completely destroy the superior army of Arabs in the Battle of Vardanakert. After, the Arab authorities were forced to recognize the hereditary rights of the Armenian Naharars, the uprising began to wane. A few years later, the Arab commander, with promises to peace negotiation, lured the Armenian Naharas to his place and, after arresting them, burned several hundred people alive. But even such atrocities could not extinguish the Armenian liberation struggle, which periodically broke out in different regions of Armenia. The reign and the fall of the Bagratuni dynasty. By the end of the 9th century, the Arab Caliphate had weakened and began to break up. To keep Armenia in obedience, the Caliph began to appoint Armenian Naharas as rulers of the country. In 855, Ashot Bagratuni was appointed Grand Duke or ruler of Armenia. In 869, he was declared King of Armenia. Although formally Armenia remained part of the Caliphate, its independence was restored. Ashot I, 885–890, was an outstanding statesman and diplomat. He managed to unite the independent Armenian principalities into a single state. His son and heir, Sambat I, 890–914, continued his father's policy, strengthening and expanding the Armenian state. In 893, he visited Constantinople and strengthened allied relations with Byzantium. His son and heir, Sambat Ashot II, led the struggle against invaders. With small forces, he managed to achieve impressive victories, for which he was nicknamed Ashot Yerkat, or Iron. In 921, in the Battle of Lake Sevan, he defeated the superior forces of Arabs. The Caliph sent Ashot Yerkat not only a royal crown, but also conferred the title of Shahin Shah, the King of Kings, which meant that Bagratuni kings were the sovereign rulers of Armenia, and all the other kings, princes and emirs are subject to them. At the same time, the city of Ani was built, and in 961 it was declared the new capital of Armenia. The kings and emirs of neighboring and subject lands attended a solemn coronation of Ashot III as Shahin Shah of Armenia. The city of Ani was located on a hard-to-reach rock near the Ahurian River and was surrounded by a ring of strong fortifications. It was called the City of 1001 Churches. Several trade routes passed through it, and its religious buildings, places and fortifications were among the most technically and artistically advanced in the world. There were many shops and guilds in Ani. Convenient markets, hotels were built, streets were paved with stone. At the peak of its development, Ani had a population of 200,000 people, and the city competed with Constantinople, Baghdad and Damascus. The majestic ruins of the Armenian capital, the remains of many churches and the cathedral have been preserved to this day. In the 11th century, the central power of Bagratuni weakened. The dynastic struggle began around the Ani throne. The Byzantine Emperor Constantine Monomachos had taken advantage of it and invited the last representative of the dynasty, Gagik II, to Constantinople, ostensibly to conclude a treaty of alliance, and captured him. In 1045, Byzantium deposed the Bagratuni dynasty and soon seized the capital of Armenia, Ani. It would seem the Byzantium Empire was at the height of its power, but at the beginning of 11th century, nomadic tribes of Turks Seljuks poured out from the Central Asia. In 1055, the Seljuks took the capital of the Caliphate, Baghdad, and the Caliph conferred the title of Sultan to their leader Turgil. The Seljuks periodically raided Armenia, destroying the cities of Artsakh, Kars, Ani, Dvin, and enslaving more than 100,000 people. In 1071, near the Armenian city of Manaskert, there was a decisive battle between the armies of Seljuk Turks and the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine army was defeated and Seljuk domination was established in the Middle East. After the Battle of Manaskert, the Seljuks captured all of the Asia Minor and created a vast empire, the Sultanate of Konya, whose borders stretched from the Bosporus to the Central Asia. Armenia became a part of the Seljuk state and was subjected to new devastations. And although semi-independent Armenian kingdoms and principalities remained for a long time in some regions, refugee flows poured out of the country, including the southeastern region of the Asia Minor Peninsula to the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. Cilician Armenia: the rise and the fall. The amazing resilience and endurance of the Armenian people are best seen through the example of the history of Cilician Armenia. Cilicia was a land of plenty, having a great strategic value. It stretched along the shores of the Mediterranean Sea, south of the Taurus Mountains, and included the Bay of Alexandretta, now Iskanderun, modern Turkey, and such cities as, for instance, Tars, the birthplace of St. Paul. From a military and political point of view, the control over Cilicia was vital for free communications between Asia Minor and Syria. The famous Cilician Gate, this narrow passage between steep mountain slopes, was the most convenient and sometimes the only reasonable route from Constantinople and Western Asia Minor to the great cities of Syria, Egypt and Mesopotamia. Before the rise of Islam, Cilicia belonged to Byzantium. In 7th century it was invaded by the Arabs, and then in 965 Emperor Nikephoros II again returned it under the rule of Constantinople. The Greeks found the country depopulated and appointed several Armenians as governors of important cities, entrusting them with the command of local military units and awarding them large estates. Gradually, these rulers acquired the status of hereditary lords and made their possessions independent enclaves and personal baronies only nominally subordinated to Constantinople. During the same period, under the pressure of Turkic raids, the stream of Armenian refugees rushing to Cilicia changed into a powerful flood. Armenians started to form an ethnic majority in these places. Between 1078 and 1085, an Armenian landowner named Filaret managed to unite vast territories, including the cities of Melitina, Marash, Edessa and Antioch. So, when the princes and knights of the First Crusade broke through the Seljuk armies, crushing them under Nicaea in 1097, they were joyfully surprised to be welcomed by a largely Christian population. The country of Armenians stretched far north to Caesarea and Cappadocia. The Armenian population of Koman and Kokson welcomed the Crusaders in the same way. One of the Armenian princes, Reuben, seized several fortresses in the mountainous part of Cilicia and declared himself an independent ruler from Byzantium. So, in 1080, the independent Armenian Principality of Rubenians emerged in Cilicia, which was destined to become the second homeland of the Armenians. All attempts by Byzantium and Seljuks to subdue the principality founded by Reuben were unsuccessful. The Crusaders, which soon began, provided further strengthening of the newborn Armenian state of Cilicia. The capital of the state became the city of Sis. The heir to the founder of the country of Armenians, Levon II Rubenian, was a talented military leader and skillful politician. He defeated the neighboring Muslim countries and expanded the borders to the state, subjugating large feudal lords to central power. For the development of international trade, Levon II began to mint gold, silver and copper coins with his image and inscriptions in Armenian, established trade relations with Venice and Genoa. He skillfully used the forces of Crusaders for the benefit of his state. The Armenian state in Cilicia was a successful combination of centuries-old Armenian statehood and Western European feudalism. Under the shade of the state power, Cilicia was quick-stepping to new peaks and rapidly growing rich. It became the main transshipment point on the Great Silk Road. Cilicia has left a lasting legacy in architecture, art, miniatures, poetry, historical writings, as well as legislative and administrative codes. But the danger began to threaten again the thriving Armenian state. During 8th century, Mamluk Egyptian state conquered Crusader states in Palestine one after another. The Kingdom of Cilicia remained the only Christian state in the Middle East. Throughout the 14th century, Mamluks made constant attacks on Cilicia, gradually alienating the maritime regions from the Kingdom of Cilicia, and in 1374 they laid siege to the city of Sis, the capital of Cilicia. After a long siege, the city was seized, and the last Armenian king was taken prisoner. In 1375, the Armenian Kingdom of Cilicia finally fell under the blows of the Egyptian Mamluks. The Armenian people lost his statehood. Cilicia became part of the Mamlukian domains until the 16th century, when it was captured by the Ottoman Empire. Despite its decline, Cilicia had opened the door for Armenians to the Western world. Through this door, they were destined to pass to the Mediterranean and Western countries, to take root in Cyprus, Cairo and Smyrna, and even in Venice and Marseille. Their community flourished in Constantinople under the Ottoman Empire until the terrible reign of Abdul Gamid and the regime of the Young Turk junta. In Jerusalem, the Armenian Patriarchate is still a force to be reckoned with in the religion, culture and political affairs of the Middle East. But after the quitting of the Armenian king Levon V, the political history of Armenia had suspended for almost 5 centuries. 500 years, full of dramatic events and ongoing struggle for its independence, would lie ahead. Armenia under the yoke of nomadic tribes of the 13th-15th centuries. In 1221, a 20,000-strong Mongol army invaded Transcaucasia. After plundering Armenia and Albania, the Mongols moved to Tiflis. In the decisive battle, the Armenian-Georgian troops, led by the King of Georgia, George Lash, and the ruler of Armenia, Eugen Zakarian, were defeated. Passing Transcaucasia, the nomads proceeded to the North Caucasus, defeated the Polovsians, and in 1223, in the Battle of Kalka, they defeated detachments of Russian princes. After collecting rich spoils of war and information about the countries they passed through, the Mongols turned back. The Turkic tribes, which migrated to Armenia under Mongols, captured the best lands and started to rule in the country. The leader of the most influential Karakoyunlu-Kra tribe, Yusuf, created his state and conferred the title of Shah and Armen, the ruler of Armenia. A brief period of relatively peaceful life had begun. The Armenian people again took up creative work, restored churches and established urban life. In the monastery complexes, the prototypes of future universities, Vardapetarans, came into existence, where 7 liberal arts were studied. Graduates received the title of Vardapet and the right to teach. In 1280, the famous Vardapetaran of Gladzor became a university, similar to the first European University of Paris. It has the faculty of divinity, theology and the law faculty. It was possible to enter there only after graduating from the Vardapetaran. At the end of the 14th century, fleeing the constant raids of nomads, the university moved to the more protected Tatev monastery, where it existed until 1444. The last leader of Tatev was the famous philosopher Grigor Tatevatsi. Thanks to the history of Kyriakos Gantzaketsi, we have a fairly clear view of the events of the 12th-13th centuries, which took place not only in Armenia and Cilicia, but also in the entire Middle East. During the same period, the Armenian literature also experienced a revival. The most prominent representative of Armenian Renaissance in literature was Grigor Narekatsi. His famous poem, The Book of Lamentations Poems, has been translated into many languages. Nerses Shnorali was a major national figure and poet. Armenian music experienced a period of its flourishing. It was then that special system of science for recording music, Has books, was invented. The traditions of folk theatre continued. Strolling actors gave performances at city markets and fairs. In 10th-14th centuries, the Armenian architecture flourished. Such masterpieces of Armenian medieval architecture as monastery complexes of Sanahin, Ahpat, Kecharis, Agartsin, Goshavank were constructed. The Gehard monastery complex is unique, part of which was carved out in the rock. In big cities, beautiful churches were built, richly decorated on the exterior and frescoed inside. The Cathedral of Ani, the capital of Armenia, was especially predominant. Its author is architect Tayredet, who undertook to restore the dome of the Temple of Saint Sophia in Constantinople, destroyed by an earthquake when Greek architects failed to do so. Architect Manvel created another masterpiece of Armenian architecture, the temple Surp-Haj on Akhtamar Island. Architect Momik built the beautiful Noravank church, successfully fitting it into the mountain landscape. Hajkas, or cross, stones are purely Armenian type of stone decorative and applied art. The cross was an obligatory attribute of a Hajkar. It symbolized the tree of life. Not a single Hajkar made even by one and the same master is repeated. Each one of the many thousands is unique. By the middle of the 15th century, the Ararat region again became the economic center of Armenia, and Yerevan was its new administrative center. Under these circumstances, the question of transferring the throne of the Catholicos from Cilicia, the new center of the Armenian statehood, back to Armenia, came up. However, Catholicos Grigor refused to move from Sis to Ararat, and in 1441 a new Catholicos was elected in HAYK. Since then, and to this day, the Catholicos of all Armenians has a residence in HAYK. The Turkish-Persian Wars, the partitions of Armenia between Ottoman Turkey and Safavid Iran. During the Mongol invasion, one of the Turkic tribes settled in the northwestern part of Asia Minor. In 1299, the leader of the tribe, Osman, declared himself an independent ruler and established a state that was called Osman Turkey after him. In 1453, the Ottoman Turks captured Constantinople and destroyed the Byzantine Empire. Ottoman Turkey became the strongest state in the Middle East, with the Balkan countries and all Asia Minor under its rule. In 1502, Shah Ismail founded a new Persian state in western regions of Iran. The unification of Iran alarmed the Ottoman Turkey. In 1512, Sultan Selim I defeated Shah Ismail and took Tabriz. The Shah did not accept the defeat. The war continued with variable success for almost half a century. The military operations took place mainly on the territory of Armenia, which both warring sides have repeatedly subjected to new devastations. Finally, in 1555, Ottoman Turkey and Iran concluded a peace, according to which the sides divided Armenia and the entire Transcaucasia between them. However, the peace did not last long, and at the end of the 16th century, the Ottomans started a new war, which ended with a new division of Armenia between Turkey and Iran. According to the Treaty of 1639, the dividing line passed along the Ahurian River, again cutting Armenia in half. Both Ottoman Turkey and Persia, in the parts they captured, carried out administrative partition and established the forms and amounts of payment of taxes. In the Turkish part of Armenia, the country was divided into provinces, vilayets. A pasha appointed by the Sultan governed the vilayet. In the Persian part of Armenia, the administrative unit was a khanate. The Christian population was obliged to pay land and capitation taxes, which were levied with a very abusive practice. In a court, the testimony of a Christian against a Muslim was not recognized. But even despite the national and religious discrimination, the establishment of a long-lasting peace between the Ottoman Empire and Persia was beneficial for the Armenian population. The agriculture was being gradually restored, a handicraft sector was being revived. Armenian merchants re-established transit trade with neighboring countries. Despite all the efforts of the invaders, small Armenian principalities were preserved on the territory of Armenia in hard-to-reach places protected by nature. The existence of islands of independence gave the Armenian population the hope for liberation from the Muslim yoke. The outstanding figure of the Armenian liberation movement of that period was officer Israel Ori, who served in the European army. Having lost faith in finding allies in Europe, he went to Russia. In 1701, Israel Ori presented to Tsar Peter I his project for the liberation of Armenia with the help of Russia. Peter promised to take up the issue after the end of the Northern War, but the unexpected death of Ori confused all the plans. Another outstanding fighter for the liberation of Armenia was the Armenian military leader David Bek, who managed to unite the forces of the Sunnic Meliks and defeated the combined forces of the Muslim rulers in the autumn of 1722. As a result of several battles, David Bek cleared Sunnic of Muslim tribes and created an Armenian principality here, the center of which was the fortress Ali Zor. In 1723, the Turkish army captured Tiflis and Ganzak. Another Turkish army besieged the Yerevan fortress. After 3 months of heroic defense, the Turks captured the city, losing 20,000 soldiers. In 1728, after the death of David Bek, a talented commander, Mkhitar Sparapet, led the liberation struggle. He repelled several new Turkish invasions, but in the end, superior Turkish forces managed to take the fortress of Ali Zor. After the murder of Mkhitar Sparapet, the liberation struggle in Sunnic died out. Despite the decline of the national liberation movement, the Armenian people did not surrender his hopes to achieve independence. He still associated those hopes with Russia. The accession of Eastern Armenia to Russia. Armenia is part of the Russian Empire. In the second half of the 18th century, the struggle to restore Armenian state independence gained a new impulse. The liberation idea became noticeably more active under the influence of Joseph Emin, a prominent representative of the Armenian liberation movement from India. In 1761, Emin arrived in Russia, presented his plan for the liberation of Armenia to Chancellor Vorontsov, and, having received letters of recommendation from him, went to the court of Georgian Tsar Irakli II. About 10 years Emin spent in Armenia, Georgia, Karabakh and the North Caucasus trying to organize the liberation struggle. After encountering many difficulties and losing hope for success, Emin returned to India. Various projects for the liberation of Armenia were drawn up, in which the main hopes were somehow linked to the Russian military assistance. The Russian-Turkish wars of the second half of the 18th century further fueled these hopes. In 1769, the Astrakhan merchant Movses Serafian presented to the Russian government a project to liberate Armenia by the forces of Armenian, Georgian volunteers and Russian military contingent. The liberated Armenia was to be organized as an independent kingdom under the protectorate of Russia. After Russia took Georgia under its patronage in 1783, hopes for Russian support were even more strengthened. The spiritual leader of the Armenians of Russia, Archbishop Joseph Argunsky, presented his project for the liberation of Armenia to Catherine II. According to this project, the liberated Armenia, with its capital in Ani, became Russia's ally. Empress Catherine II was to appoint the Tsar of Armenia. Close economic ties were to be established between the two countries. In 1801, Georgia and the Armenian-populated regions of Flori, Shamshadin and Kazakh were annexed to Russia by a special decree. Russia's establishment in Transcaucasia soon led to military actions with Persia and Turkey. During the First Russia-Persian War, Russian troops under the command of General Tsitsianov inflicted several defeats on Persians, captured Ganja Khanate and in 1805 besieged Yerevan fortress, but without success. Armenian provinces Shirak, Karabakh and Zangezur voluntarily passed under the Russian citizenship. The Armenian population rendered all possible assistance and support to Russian troops. During the whole war, Armenian volunteer detachment fought alongside Russian troops. At the instigation of Napoleon, Turkey entered the war against Russia. Thus, in Transcaucasia, the Russian troops had to fight on two fronts. There was a real threat of unification of Turkish-Persian armies. However, the new commander-in-chief General Gudovich in 1807 in the Battle of the Akhurian River managed to defeat the Turkish army, thus preventing the unification of Turkish-Persian forces. Gudovich's attempt to seize the Yerevan fortress unfortunately ended in vain. In 1812, a peace treaty was concluded with Turkey. However, Persia continued the war, hoping that Russia would be defeated by the troops of Napoleon. Only after the Russian troops inflicted new defeat on Persians, Persia sued for peace. According to the Treaty of Gulistan on October 12, 1813, northern regions of Armenia and Karabakh passed to Russia. During the Second Russia-Persian War, Russian troops under the command of General Paskevich captured the territories of Yerevan and Nakhichevan Khanates. On August 17, 1827, in the battle near Oshakan, the 3,000-strong Russian corps of General Krasovsky defeated the 10-fold stronger Persian army and saved the spiritual center of Armenians, Saint Echmiadzin. On October 1st of the same year, Russian troops stormed the Yerevan fortress. Afterwards, for this victory, Tsar Nicholas I conferred on Paskevich the title of Count of Yerevan. Catholicos Nerses Ashtaraketsi inspired and blessed Armenians to serve the cause of the liberation of their homeland. Armenian volunteer detachments and militias fought together with the Russians in all battles, serving as reconnaissance troopers and guides. Under the Treaty of Turkmenchai on February 10, 1828, the territories of Yerevan and Nakhichevan Khanates were annexed to Russia. From now on, the Russian-Iranian boundary was set at the Aras River and remained unchanged in the future. The Armenian population that had been driven to Iran in the past times and during the last wars got the right to move to Armenia's regions that had fallen under the Russians' rule. This undoubtedly was a great merit of the Russian ambassador to Persia, Alexander Griboyedov. On February 10, 1828, a peace treaty was signed in the village of Turkmenchay. Eastern Armenia was forever liberated from the age-old Persian yoke, everlastingly twisting its fortune with the Russian people. The text of this treaty was drafted by Russian diplomat, famous Russian poet Alexander Sergeyevich Griboyedov. Secretary of Russian Embassy in Persia, Alexander Griboyedov lived and worked in the Caucasus and Iran for 10 years. This was the most fruitful period in his short life. In 1822, Alexander Griboyedov was appointed head of the diplomatic office under the chief executive officer of the Russian troops in the Caucasus. The great humanist Alexander Griboyedov made great efforts to liberate Eastern Armenia. During the Russia-Persian War of 1826–1828, Griboyedov was always in the combat army. He participated in all battles on the territory of Armenia. On June 12 and 19, 1827, he miraculously escaped from the bullet of the enemy in the Battle of the Approaches to Yerevan. He was also seen in the battles in Garni, Artashat and Ararat. On June 25, Griboyedov wrote in his diary, "The day has got off to a good start. We are saving the villagers from the oppression. The war in general is the most humane." He took an active part in the liberation of Yerevan on October 1, 1827, and was awarded the medal for the capture of the Yerevan fortress. It is also significant that the comedy War from Wheat was staged for the first time in Yerevan in 1827, in the presence of the author. This is one of the memorable pages in the life of the Russian poet, as well as in the history of the city. The Russia-Persian War of 1826–1828 ended with the victory of Russian troops. A peace treaty was concluded. It was compiled by Griboyedov. He consulted with the prominent Armenian figure Nerses Ashtaraketsi and others about all the points concerning Armenians, taking into account their wishes. Griboyedov also played an invaluable role in the resettlement of more than 40,000 Armenians from Persia to Eastern Armenia. None of the international treaties had such a great importance for the fate of the Armenian people as Turkmenchay one. When the body of the deceased was transported through Armenia to Tiflis, all Armenian towns and villages mourned his death. A street and a school are named after him in Yerevan, and a monument was erected in the center of the city in 1975. The consolidation of Russia's position in Transcaucasia alarmed Ottoman Turkey, that had led to the Russo-Turkish War of 1828–1829. On the Caucasian front, Russian troops under the command of General Paskevich defeated Turkish troops, besieged and took fortified fortresses Kos, Ahalkalak, Ahaltsikhe and Babert, took without a fight Bayazet, Mush, Alashkert and the largest city in the eastern Turkey, Erzurum. The local Armenian population and volunteer detachments greatly contributed to the victories of the Russian troops. Alexander Pushkin, traveling through the Caucasus at that time, also visited Erzurum with Russian troops. In his notes Journey to Erzurum, the reigning joyful mood among the Armenian population, friendly attitude toward the Russian troops and the expectation of liberation from the Turkish yoke were vividly described. Turkish troops were also defeated on the Balkan front, and on September 2, 1829, the Adrianople Peace Treaty was concluded between Russia and Turkey. The eastern coast of the Black Sea, with the port of Poti, Ahalkalak and Ahaltsikh, passed to Russia. As a result of wars with Persia and Turkey, the northeastern regions of Armenia were annexed to Russia, and about 120,000 Armenian resettles settled down in Russian Armenia. The danger of a physical destruction had disappeared for a part of the Armenian people. The Armenian people hoped to gain a state self-government under the patronage of Russia, but the Tsarist government, on the contrary, sought to abolish any remnants of self-government in the territories under its control. In March 1828, by the decree of Nicholas I, the territories of Yerevan and Nakhchivan Khanates that had been separated from Iran were united into administrative unit Armenian region. In 1840, the Armenian region was abolished. In 1849, Yerevan Governorate was established, which consisted of 5 counties. The hopes of Armenians for self-government were not destined to come true. The Crimean War of 1853–1856. In 1853, another Russo-Turkish war broke out between Turkey and Russia. It is better known as the Crimean War, because the main military actions took place on the Crimean Peninsula. At the instigation of England and France, Turkish troops launched an offensive on the borders region of Armenia and Georgia. The commander of the Caucasian Corps, a well-known Armenian military leader, General Babutov, managed to stop the Turkish offensive, and in the battle near the village of Bashkadiklar, his 10,000 corps defeated the 36,000 Turkish army. In 1854, in the battle of the village of Kurukdar, 18,000 Russian corps defeated the superior enemy forces and in November 1855 stormed the fortress of Kars. Significant territories of Western Armenia were under the control of Russia. The Armenian population actively helped the Russian troops, hoping that after the war this region would be annexed to Russia. Meanwhile, on the Crimean front, things were moving not in favor of Russia. The initial successes of the Russian troops alarmed England and France. In 1854, they entered the war on the side of Turkey. Anglo-French troops landed in the Crimea and after a long siege captured the city of Sevastopol, the main base of the Russian Black Sea Fleet. The war ended with the defeat of Russia on the main front. Under the Paris Peace Treaty of 1856, Russia was forced to return to Turkey the captured territories in the Balkans and Transcaucasia in exchange for the Crimea to remain a part of Russia. A part of the Armenian population of Western Armenia, who hoped to get rid of the Turkish yoke and help the Russian troops in every possible way, was forced to move to the Russian Empire. Part 9. The liberation struggle of the Armenian people in the second half of the 19th century. The Armenian Issue. By the middle of the 19th century, the situation of Christian peoples in the Ottoman Empire continued to deteriorate. The majority of the Armenian population was engaged in agriculture. The owner of the land cultivated by peasant was the state. Therefore, a large tax was paid on the harvest. In addition, Armenians, like all Christian subjects of the empire, paid a capitation tax for practicing their religion. The situation could only improve with a change of the geopolitical situation in this region, where two irreconcilable rivals, Russia and Turkey, remained the key players. Several Russo-Turkish wars took place throughout the 19th century. The Armenian people, as well as the Balkan peoples, contributed in every possible way to the victory of Russia and participated in the wars in the hope of liberation from the Turkish yoke. The next Russo-Turkish War took place in 1877–1878. Russia sought to restore its influence in the Middle East, lost after defeat in the Crimean War. Military operations took place on the Balkan and Caucasian fronts. The commander-in-chief of the Caucasian Corps was General Mikhail Loris-Melikov. Special corps were also commanded by other Armenian generals in Russian service: Arshak Tergukasov, Ivan Lazarev, and others. On the Caucasian front, Russian troops captured the fortress cities Bayazet and Alashkert and besieged the Kars fortress. The Turks, having concentrated large forces, launched a counteroffensive and besieged the fortress of Bayazet in the rear of the Russian troops. The capture of Bayazet would put the Caucasian Corps in a difficult position. The strength and ammunition of the defenders of the fortress were running out, and the Turks captured their contacts. Armenian volunteer Samson Terpogosyan, pretending to be insane, managed to pass through the Turkish cordons and deliver news to General Tergukasov. The heroic defense of Bayazet was reflected in fiction books. The novels Hand by Armenian writer Rafi and Bayazet by Russian writer Pikul are dedicated to it. Having stopped the offensive of Turkish forces on the Caucasian front, Russian troops went on the offensive and by the end of 1877 stormed the fortress of Kars, captured the cities of Erzurum, Sarikamish and Ardagan. On the Balkan front, the Russian army also gained major victories, liberating the territory of Bulgaria and approaching Constantinople. On February 19, 1878, San Stefano Peace Treaty was signed between Russia and Ottoman Turkey, under which the Balkan countries gained independence. Western Armenia's Kars, Alashkert and Bayazet regions joined Russia. Under Clause 16 of the treaty, Ottoman Turkey undertook to carry out reforms to improve the situation of the Armenian population of Western Armenia. The European powers, led by England, not wishing the further strengthening of Russia, forced to revise the result of the Russia-Turkish War in favor of Ottoman Turkey. In June 1878, an international congress was convened in Berlin. Under the Berlin Treaty, the independence of the Balkan peoples was curtailed, and large territories of Western Armenia that had been captured by Russian troops were returned to Ottoman Turkey. Russian troops were to immediately withdraw from the captured territories of Western Armenia. At the Congress, for the first time in international politics, an Armenian issue was also discussed. Being initially recorded in Clause 16, this item was thereafter placed to Clause 61 of the Berlin Peace Treaty, which vaguely ordered Turkey to take steps to improve the legal status of the Armenian population and its protection from attacks of Circassians and Kurds. The Armenian delegation, headed by Catholicos Hrimian, was not even allowed to discuss the issue. After the Berlin Congress, Sultan Abdul Hamid II strengthened anti-Armenian policy in Turkey. Pogroms and massacres began in the Armenian regions. Over 30 years, the taxes on the Armenian population had been increased fourfold. The discrimination of ethnic grounds became more intense. The Hamidi regiments, special armed irregular units of lumpen elements, were created who constantly oppressed and robbed the Armenian population of Western Armenia. The unpunished racial harassment of the Armenian population under the conditions of the national oppression gave rise to a spontaneous resistance of the Armenian population. Some daredevils left a shelter and a house, went to the mountains and became Haiduks Fidains. Singly or in small groups, they fought with bands of robbers, Turkish gendarmes and punished the most brutal representatives of the authorities. The famous Haiduks of their time were Andronik, Ahpur Serop, Vazgen, Gevorg Chaush, Gurgen and others. By their actions, these national heroes to some extent restrained the atrocities of the Turkish authorities and Kurdish nomadic tribes. Over time, their forces and methods of struggle were used by Armenian political parties to organize self-defense of the population of Western Armenia. In the second half of the 19th century, political groups and organizations began to emerge among the Armenian intelligentsia in Western and Eastern Armenia. The transformation of the Armenian issue into an issue of international politics and the formation of the Armenian bourgeoisie contributed to the awakening of national consciousness and the idea of recreating the Armenian state. In the 70s-80s, secret societies emerged and operated in Alexandropol, Moscow, Van, Erzurum and other cities of Eastern and Western Armenia and Russia. In 1885, Mkrtich Terlemezyan founded the Armenakan party in Van. Its goal was to awaken the national consciousness of the Armenian population of Western Armenia and raise it to the liberation struggle against the Ottoman yoke. In 1887 in Geneva, a group of Armenian students headed by Avetis Nazarbekyan and Ruben Hanazad founded the party called Hunchakian. The party received its name from the newspaper of the same name, Hunchak, Bell. In its program, the party set the immediate goal to liberate the Armenian people and considered the building of socialism to be the ultimate goal. Having played a significant role in organizing self-defense of Armenian population against Turkish violence, the Hunchakian party later split into two wings, national and socialist. In 1890, in Tiflis, the Dashnak-Sutyun party, Armenian Revolutionary Union, was formed by the efforts of Stepan Zoryan, Christopher Mikhailian and Simon Zavaryan. The party aimed at liberating Western Armenia and solving the Armenian issue. By the end of the 19th century, Dashnak-Sutyun has already become the leading party of the Armenian social and political life due to its activity and devotion to the liberation movement. Despite the enormous oppression of the Christian peoples, it was the Armenian, Greek and Jewish populations that played the most active role in the economic development of the Ottoman Empire. In Constantinople, Izmir, Erzurum and other major cities, Armenian industrialists established enterprises for the production of flour, oil, wine, vodka and textile products. Well-known merchants were brothers Kurkchan, Grigor Ipekchan, brothers Barikyan and others. Their factories were periodically vandalized and rebuilt each time. At the end of the 19th century, the situation of the Armenians became critical. In order to resolve the notorious Armenian issue and suppress the liberation aspirations of the Armenian people, the government of Abdul Hamid II began to conduct Armenian outrages with the involvement of gendarmes. At the end of 1895, mass massacres were committed in Erzurum, Trabzon, Bitlis, Sebastia, Edessa and other cities. Almost 300,000 Armenians were killed. A considerable number of the Armenian population was forced to leave the country. Many Christians were forced to adopt Islam. Armenian political parties, fearing new outrages, began to prepare the Armenian population for self-defense. When in 1896 the government tried to repeat such outrages, it had already met an organized resistance from the Armenian population in some places. In 1904, the heroic self-defense of Sassoon took place. The city resisted for a long time, and on April 1, 1904, the 10,000th Regular Army and the 5,000th Detachments Hamidi took Sassoon in a tight ring. They were resisted like Spartan heroes by 200 brave Fidayins and 1,000 local peasants who defended 12,000 Armenian population. The Hajduk detachments of Andranik, Murat, Arakel, Gevorg Chaush and others gathered their forces to Sassoon. The military council led the self-defense and the well-known Fidayin Andranik became the military commander. Despite the heroic resistance of the Sassoonians, regular troops and Kurdish detachments captured Sassoon and brutally massacred the population. The victims numbered in the thousands. In 1908, after a coup, the Young Turks Party came to power. All the peoples of the Ottoman Empire welcomed the fall of the bloody regime of Sultan Abdul Hamid II. However, pan-Turkism and pan-Islamism became the official policy of the Young Turks. Having met with the resistance of their plans, the government of the Young Turks began to act with the same methods of nationalist terror. In the spring of 1909, the Young Turks ordered massacres of the Armenian population and total pillaging in Cilicia. In some towns and villages, the Armenian population was saved thanks to the heroic self-defense. In total, more than 30,000 Armenians were butchered. In 1912, a triumvirate of leaders of the Young Turk Party came to power in Turkey, which concentrated all power in its hands. All state issues in the Ottoman Empire were now resolved by Talat, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Enver, the Minister of War, and Cemal, the Minister of Internal Affairs. It were those executioners of the Armenian people who conceived an idea to finish with the Armenian issue by total extermination of Armenians, first in the Ottoman Empire and then outside it. And the trigger for the realization of those cannibalistic plans would be the First World War. Part 10. The First World War. The Armenian Genocide in the Ottoman Empire in 1915. On August 1st, 1914, World War I began. The war was fought between two coalitions, the Entente, England, France, Russia, and the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Turkey, for the redistribution of spheres of influence in the world. Most states of the world took part in the war voluntarily or forcibly. During the war, Ottoman Turkey tried to implement a pan-Turkism program to join the territories inhabited by Turkic peoples, including the Transcaucasia, southern regions of Russia and Central Asia, up to the Altai. In its turn, Russia sought to annex the territory of Western Armenia, capture the Bosporus and Dardanelles, Straits and reach the Mediterranean Sea. During the First World War, in Russia, about 200,000 Armenians were called into the army. Over 50,000 Armenians fought in the armies of other countries. As the plans of the Tsarist government coincided with the aspirations of the Armenian people to liberate the territories of Western Armenia from the Turkish yoke, the Armenian political parties actively propagandized the organization of volunteer movement. By their effort, 7 Armenian volunteer groups with a total number of about 10,000 people were organized. The first detachments was commanded by the outstanding leader of the liberation movement, national hero Andronik Ozanyan, who later received the title of General of the Russian Army. The commander of the 6th detachment later became HAYK Bzhishkyan, HAY, the future legendary commander of the Red Army. In 1915-1918, the Young Turks government of Turkey planned and carried out the genocide of the Armenian population in the Ottoman Empire. 1.5 million people were killed during the forcible expulsion of Armenians from their historical homeland. Back in the 1911, in Thessaloniki, at a secret meeting of the Young Turks Party, it was decided to Turkize all their subjects and eliminate Christians, Armenians, Greeks and Russians. With the beginning of World War I, the Young Turks government decided to take advantage of the favorable international situation and implement those decisions. The genocide was carried out according to a certain plan. First, all men liable for military service were called into the army in order to deprive the Armenian population of the opportunity to resist. They were transferred into labor battalions and then systematically murdered. Secondly, the Armenian intelligentsia, which could organize and lead the resistance of Armenian population, was eliminated. In March-April 1915, over 600 people were arrested. Honik Vramyan and Grigor Zohrab, writers Varuzhan, Siamanto, Ruben Sevak, composer and musicologist Komitas. On their way to the place of exile, they were subjected to insults and humiliations. Many of them died on the way. The survivors were later brutally killed. On April 24, 1915, Young Turkish authorities executed the first 20 political prisoners of Armenians. The well-known composer Komitas, an eyewitness of these atrocities, lost his mind. Then the Young Turkish authorities proceeded with the expulsion and extermination of the defenseless children, old people and women. On the way to the place of exile, Armenians were subjected to new atrocities. The weak were killed, women were raped or kidnapped for harems, children died of hunger and thirst. Out of the total number of exiled Armenians, barely a tenth arrived at the place of exile, the Deir el-Zor desert in Mesopotamia. Out of 2.5 million Armenians in the Ottoman Empire, 1.5 million were eliminated and the rest scattered around the world. A part of the Armenian population was able to escape thanks to the help of Russian troops and, abandoning everything, fled from their native places to the Russian Empire. Thousands of Armenian orphans were saved by American charitable and missionary organizations operating in the Middle East. After the defeat in the war and the flight of the Young Turk leaders, the new government of Ottoman Turkey in 1920 investigated the crimes of the former authorities. For planning and implementation of the Armenian genocide, the military tribunal in Constantinople found Talat, Enver, Jamal and Behaydin Shakir, secretary of the Central Committee of the Young Turks Party, guilty and sentenced to death in absentia. After losing the war, the young Turkish leaders fled Turkey and found refuge in Germany and other countries. But they failed to escape retribution. Armenian avengers carried out the verdict. Sogomon Tehlirian shot Talat in Berlin on March 15, 1921. The German court, having considered this case, acquitted Tehlirian. Petros Ter-Petrosyan and Artashes Gevorkyan killed Jamal in Tiflis on July 25, 1922. On April 17, 1922, in Berlin, Behaydin Shakir was shot dead by Sogomon Tehlirian, Arshavir Shirakyan and Aram Yerkanyan. Enver was killed in August 1922 in Central Asia. During the genocide of 1915, the Armenian population of some regions managed to escape by means of heroic self-defense or died with honor, with weapons in their hands. For more than a month, the residents of Van city and nearby villages heroically defended themselves against regular Turkish troops. Armenak Yekaryan, Aram Manukyan, Panos Terlemesyan and others led the self-defense. All Armenian political parties acted in a unified and coordinated manner. They were saved from the final destruction by the Russian army attack on Van in May 1915. Due to the forced retreat of the Russian troops, 200,000 Armenians of Van Vilayet were also forced to leave their homeland together with the Russian troops to escape a new massacre. For almost a year, the Highlanders of Sassoon defended themselves against the regular Turkish troops. Out of the 50,000 inhabitants of Sassoon, approximately a tenth escaped and was forced to leave their homeland and moved to the borders of the Russian Empire. The Armenian population of the town of Shapin-Garaysar, having received the resettlement order, took up arms and fortified themselves in a nearby half-destroyed fortress. For 27 days, the Armenians repulsed the attacks of regular Turkish forces. When food and ammunition were nearly exhausted, it was decided to try to break out the encirclement. About 1,000 people were saved. The rest were brutally killed. The defenders of Musaler showed the example of heroic self-defense. After receiving the order of eviction, the 5,000 Armenian population of 7 villages of Suecia region on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea near Antioch decided to defend themselves and fortified themselves on Mount Musa. For a month and a half, there were unequal battles with Turkish troops armed with artillery. The French cruiser Guichen noticed the call of Armenians for help, and on September 10, 1915, the survived 4,058 Armenians were transported to Egypt by French and English ships. Austrian writer Franz Werfel describes the story of this heroic self-defense in the novel 40 Days of Musa Dag. The last outbreak of heroism was the self-defense of the population of the Armenian quarter of Yedishia, which lasted from September 29 to November 5, 1915. All men died with weapons in their hands, and the Young Turks authorities exiled the survived 15,000 women and children to the desert of Mesopotamia. The foreigners who witnessed the genocide of 1915-1916 condemned this crime and left descriptions of the atrocities committed against the Armenian population by the Young Turk authorities. They also refuted the false accusations of the Turkish authorities that there had allegedly been an Armenian uprising. Johannes Lepsius, Anatole France, Henry Morgenthau, Maxim Gorky, Valery Brusov and many others raised their voices against the first genocide and atrocities in the history of the 20th century. Nowadays, the parliaments of many countries have already recognized and condemned the genocide of the Armenian people perpetrated by the Young Turks. The responsibility for the genocide of the Armenian population lies with the leaders of the Young Turks party. Turkish Prime Minister Talat later cynically stated that there was no more the Armenian issue, as there were no more Armenians, and that he had done more to solve the Armenian question in 3 months than Sultan Abdul Hamid II during his 30 years of rule. The Kurdish tribes were also actively involved in the extermination of Armenians, seeking to seize Armenian territories and plunder Armenian property. The German government and command are also responsible for the Armenian genocide. Many German officers commanded the Turkish units that took part in the genocide. The Entente powers, except Russia, were also responsible for what had happened. They did nothing to stop the mass extermination of the Armenian population by the Young Turk authorities. During the genocide, more than 2,000 Armenian villages, as many churches and monasteries were destroyed. After the genocide of 1915, there was almost no Armenian population left in Western Armenia. On February 27, 1917, the Second Bourgeois Democratic Revolution took place in Russia, and the Tsarist autocracy broke down. Prior to the convening of the Constituent Assembly, a provisional government was established in Russia. By the decision of the provisional government in March 1917, the power of the governor was abolished in Transcaucasia, and a temporary authority body, Ozakom, Special Transcaucasian Committee, was formed consisting of 5 deputies of the State Duma from Transcaucasia. By special decree of the provisional government, the territories of Western Armenia occupied by Russian troops during the war received a special status. The provisional government appointed General Averyanov as the Commissioner of Western Armenia. Conditions were created for the return of the Armenian refugees to their native places. Armenian national councils were formed in Yerevan, Tiflis and Baku. The leading role among them was played by the National Council in Tiflis, under the chairmanship of the famous writer Avetis Agaronyan. The provisional government continued to participate in the World War, which was unpopular in Russia. The issue of land was not resolved, which the Russian peasantry was hoping for. The Bolshevik Party took advantage of that opportunity and, in October 1917, committed an armed uprising and overthrew the provisional government. The Soviet power was established in Russia. On the national suburbs, the new Soviet power of Russia was not recognized. With the support of local national councils in Tiflis, the Transcaucasian Commissariat of former deputies of the State Duma was formed as a local authority. The Soviet government, in turn, did not recognize the commissariat and appointed the famous Bolshevik Stepan Shaumyan as a temporary extraordinary commissioner on the Caucasus affairs. The Soviet government announced its withdrawal from the World War, the compensation-free transfer of land to the peasants, and the right of peoples of the Russian Empire to self-determination, up to the creation of national states. The Caucasian front began to fall apart. Russian soldiers were hurrying home to get land. At the end of the 1917, a truce was signed with Germany and its ally Turkey, and negotiations began in order to sign a peace treaty. On December 29, 1917, the Soviet government granted Western Armenia, which was occupied by Russian troops during the war, the right to self-determination by a special decree. But under the prevailing conditions of anarchy and the threat of a Turkish attack, it was not possible to implement the decree. By the order of the Russian command, a separate Armenian corps under the command of General Tovmas Nazarbekyan was formed at the end of 1917 in order to hold the front after the Russian troops left. By the decision on the Armenian National Council, a volunteer division was formed under the command of General Andranik. The front was also held by Hajduk detachments and local volunteers. The stabilization of the situation in Western and Eastern Armenia was also led by the Armenian National Council in Yerevan, headed by Aram Manukyan. The formation of national armed forces had begun. Armenian officers who served in the Russian army began to gather in Yerevan: General Silikyan, Colonels Bek Piromyan and Zalinyan. On March 3, 1918, the Brest-Litovsk peace was signed between the Soviet Russia and Germany and its allies, which had the disastrous aftermath for the Armenian people. Under the clause number 4 of the peace treaty, Russia assumed the obligation to withdraw its troops from the territories of Western Armenia, occupied by it, as well as to transfer to Turkey the regions of Kars, Ardahan and Batum. In commemoration of the Brest-Litovsk Treaty, Turkish forces began to occupy the said territories. The Armenian corps retreated with fighting, inflicting considerable losses on the enemy. Turks captured Erzinca, Trabzon, Van, Erzurum, Babert and marched on Kars. As early as on February 10, 1918, the Transcaucasian Sejm was opened in Tiflis, where deputies of the All-Russian Constituent Assembly, elected from Transcaucasia, held a session. The Sejm declared itself a supreme power in Transcaucasia, and on March 1, 1918, began separate peace negotiations with Turkey in Trabzon. Alexander Hatisyan and Hovannes Gajasnuni participated in it from the Armenian National Council. The Turkish side stated that the territories of Eastern Anatolia, Western Armenia, are an integral part of Turkey and demanded the Transcaucasian Sejm to declare the Transcaucasia independent of Russia. On April 9, 1918, under the pressure from Georgian and Muslim delegates, the Sejm, against the will of Armenian delegates, declared the Transcaucasia independent of Russia. The demand of the Turkish side to separate Transcaucasia from Russia was a diplomatic ploy to neutralize possible Russian interference in the course of subsequent events. Turkey's ultimate goal was to seize the entire Transcaucasia and, in particular, the rich deposits of Baku oil. The Turkish command demanded the surrender of the Kars fortress, which could withstand a long siege. Despite the objections of General Nazarbekyan, the head of the Transcaucasian Federal Republic Çengeli ordered to surrender Kars to the Turks in order to preserve the integrity of Georgian territories. Although new negotiations with Turkey were held in Batum from May 1918, the Turkish army continued to attack and unexpectedly seized Alexandropol. The government of the Transcaucasian Federation ordered the city to be surrendered to the Turks. Turkish armies, continuing their offensive, moved on Yerevan and on May 20, 1918, captured Sardarabad, taking control of the railway. There was a real threat of complete physical destruction of the remaining part of the Armenian people. Being in the hardest conditions, the entire Armenian people rose to his defense. All social groups of the population, all political parties acted in a single impulse. The Yerevan National Council, under the leadership of Aram Manukyan, displayed great self-control and did a lot of organizational work. General Movses Silikyan carried out the command of the Yerevan Corps. Another corps under the command of Dro, Rastamat Kanayan, was sent to dislodge the enemy from the Bashaparan. The Armenian units that retreated from Alexandropol defended the way to the Karakilis. On May 22, 1918, the Sardarabad group of troops under the command of Colonel Daniel Bekpirumyan and with the support of the population of the surrounding villages inflicted heavy losses on the Turks and drove them out of Sardarabad. The Turkish units retreated in panic to the Arax River. This victory raised the fighting spirit of the Armenian troops and people even more. In heavy battles on May 24-29, the corps of Dro cut Turkish forces to pieces near Bashaparan and threw them back to Alexandropol. The Turkish command concentrated considerable forces to capture Karakilis because the road to Tiflis could be opened from there. From May 24 to May 28, 1918, the hard-fought Battle of Karakilis was launched. The units under the command of Colonels Bey Mamikoyan and Korganyan, the squadron of Lieutenant Garegin Jde, fought bravely. The enemy suffered huge losses. With victories in May, the Armenian people showed their will to live, defended their independence, and destroyed the aggressive plans of the Young Turks government. Part 11. The Proclamation of the Armenian Republic. The May victories of the Armenian people were of great historical importance. They forced Turkey to be more flexible in negotiations. On June 4, 1918, a peace treaty was signed in Batum between Turkey and the young Armenian Republic. Armenia maintained its independence, but suffered great territorial losses. An area of 12,000 square kilometers around Lake Sevan was left to Armenia. The Republic was allowed to have a small army needed for maintaining internal security and order. The country's foreign policy and railway communications passed under the control of Turkey. Back in late April 1918, the Soviet power was established in Baku. The Council of People's Commissars, headed by Stepan Shaumyan, was formed. The Soviet power did not extend to entire Azerbaijan, but was only in Baku, so it was called Baku Commune. General Hakop Bagratuni and other Armenian commanders led the defense of Baku Commune. About 18,000 Armenian soldiers and volunteers fought in the ranks of the defenders. Repulsing the attacks of Turkish troops, they were well aware that they were also defending the independence of the Armenian Republic. After the capture of Baku, the Young Turks government planned the final destruction of the Armenian Republic, the recognition of which the Turks considered as a temporary measure. The Baku Commune had existed for just over 3 months without receiving any help from Soviet Russia. The population surrendered the city to British troops, who shot down 26 Baku commissars. But the British could not hold the city for long. On September 15, 1918, the Turks captured Baku, plundered and massacred the Armenian population. Turkey soon capitulated to the Entente Powers, having been defeated in World War I. The First Republic of Armenia was being shaped in difficult conditions of internal and external environment. The country was flooded with refugees and street children. It felt the lack of food. The economy of the country was destroyed. There were no resources, railways and roads were destroyed or were in the enemy hands. On May 28, 1918, Armenians' independence was declared in Tiflis and pre-parliament was formed on the basis of the Armenian National Council, and a government was also set up. Before the removal of the government from Tiflis to Yerevan on July 17, 1918, the head of Yerevan National Council, Aram Manukyan, performed the functions of state administration in Armenia. On August 1, 1918, the first session of the Armenian pre-parliament was opened in a solemn atmosphere, where all the nationalities living in the Republic were represented. The pre-parliament consisted of 74 deputies, including 6 Muslims, 1 Russians, even a Yazidi. All Armenian political parties were represented: Constitutional Democrats, Cadets, Mensheviks, Socialist Revolutionaries, Esers, Gnachakans, and even 1 Bolshevik. The majority in the pre-parliament was held by the Dashnaktsutun party, which formed the government headed by Hovaneska Jaznuni. The work on the creation of the Constitution of Armenia was initiated. Democratic freedoms of speech, conscience and religion were proclaimed. The symbols of independent statehood, flag, national emblem and anthem were approved. The Armenian national flag was tricolored. One interpretation of its symbolism is that red stood for the blood shed by Armenians in the past, blue was for the pure sky over Armenia, golden or apricot symbolized labor. The Armenian national emblem was approved by mid-1920. Its authors were Alexander Tamanyan and Hakop Kojoyan. In the center was a shield divided into 4 sections, each of which had the coat of arms of 4 Armenian dynasties around the image of the biblical Mount Ararat. An eagle and a lion supported the shield. Nowadays, this same coat of arms is the national emblem of the modern Republic of Armenia. From the day of its creation and for 2.5 years of its existence, the Armenian Republic had been in the hardest economic conditions. As a result of wars and the economic meltdown, Famine, typhus and the cholera epidemics occurred at the end of 1918 and lasted for about a year. The government of the Republic has taken emergency measures to improve the situation. A state monopoly on bread and basic goods was declared. The Armenian delegation, headed by Prime Minister Yervanduni, went to the USA to receive a loan and buy bread. With the support of the administration of President Woodrow Wilson, Armenia received a state credit of $10 million from the United States, and with the assistance of the American Food Aid Committee, by mid-1990, bread, medicines and essential goods began to arrive in Armenia. By the end of 1919, famine and epidemics were mostly overcome. It was supposed to develop agriculture through the creation of farm-type enterprises. A preliminary plan for the development of country's economy was drawn up, according to which the government encouraged the development of small enterprises producing cognac, wine, cheese, canned fruits and vegetables. The country received assistance from various American aid committees for Armenia, Armenian entrepreneurs and private individuals. The construction of power station, irrigation channels, roads and internal railway lines was envisaged. Elementary and secondary schools has been opened in the country. In 1919, the preparatory work began for the establishment of the National University. The solemn opening of the university was held in January 1920 in Alexandropol. The Armenian Republic had rather complicated relations with neighboring states. While peaceful and good neighborly relations were maintained with Iran, the relations with Turkey were initially hostile. Serious territorial disputes existed with Georgia and Azerbaijan, leading to military clashes. In its time, the Tsarist government ignored the national ethnic principle during the administrative division of Transcaucasia. After the fall of the Tsarist power and the formation of independent states, border and territorial disputes arose between Armenia, Georgia and Azerbaijan. The districts of Ahalkalaki and Lori, inhabited mainly by Armenians, were in former times administratively subordinated to the Tiflis Governorate. On this basis, the government of Georgia claimed these territories. At the end of 1918, when Turkish troops left Transcaucasia after the capitulation, Georgian troops captured the regions of Lori and Ahalkalaki. Armenian troops liberated Lori in December 1918. With the intervention of the English command, the Lori district became neutrality zone under the control of the British commissioner. The territorial dispute was resolved only after the establishment of the Soviet power in the region. Lori was left to Armenia, and Ahalkalak was recognized by Armenia as part of Georgia. Even more complicated relations were developed with Azerbaijan, which claimed the territories of Nakhichevan, Karabakh and Zangezur with a predominantly Armenian population. At the end of the 1918, Turkish armies advancing on Baku to suppress the commune simultaneously massacred the Armenian population of Nakhichevan, after which the Armenians were no longer an ethnic majority there. The Turks also tried to seize Karabakh by force and join it to Azerbaijan. This attempt failed, stumbling upon the heroic defense of the Armenian population of Karabakh. The volunteer division of Andranik defended Zangezur from the invasion of Turkish forces since August 1918. After the conclusion of the Treaty of Batum, Andranik retreated to Iran. Under the protection of his division, about 20,000 Armenian refugees gathered, and Andranik transported them to Nakhichevan and Zangezur and protected them until the establishment of the state power of Armenia there. After withdrawal of Turkish troops from Transcaucasia, British troops entered the region and captured Baku. England sought to take control of the Baku oil fields. The British were satisfied with the anti-Bolshevik, anti-Russian policy of the Azerbaijani government. Proceeding from its own interests, the English command, as Turkey before, tried to solve territorial claims to Armenia in favor of Azerbaijan, to subordinate Karabakh, Zangezur and Nakhichevan. The Armenian population of Karabakh, which made up to 90% of the population of the region, decided to appeal to the government of the Republic of Armenia to consider the region as integral part of Armenia. At the request of the population, Andranik and his division moved to Karabakh in order to prevent its forces' annexation to Azerbaijan. The commander of British troops in Baku demanded from Andranik to leave Karabakh. Otherwise, he threatened that it would be considered as a hostile act against England. Andranik returned to Zangezur and held the region until April 1919. After the Armenian government declared the establishment of united and independent Armenia, Andranik handed over the region to the authorized Armenian representative Colonel Arsen Shahmazian and soon left Armenia. Having received official support from the Allies, Armenia has taken decisive steps. Dro was appointed as an authorized representative of northern Zangezur and Karabakh, Captain Gargin Shde of southern Zangezur and eastern part of Nakhichevan. Having organized a self-defense of the local population, they managed to defeat the advancing Azerbaijani forces and launch an attack. Shde cleared the territory of Zangezur, and Dro troops in March 1920 entered Karabakh and started its liberation. The retreating Azerbaijani troops massacred the Armenian population in Shusha and set fire to Armenian quarter of the city. By the middle of 1920, Karabakh, Zangezur and Nakhichevan were already under the jurisdiction of the Republic of Armenia. The Republic of Armenia established diplomatic relations and had representations in Turkey, the United States, France, Switzerland, Bulgaria, Japan and other countries. In its foreign policy, Armenia was oriented towards the Entente countries and Western states allied with it. After the capitulation of Germany and Ottoman Turkey in the First World War, the Brest-Litovsk and Batum treaties were cancelled. In March 1919, with the support of British units, the Armenian army liberated the Kars region and Surmala, illegally captured by the Turks. The territories of Western Armenia were nominally passed under the jurisdiction of the Entente powers, but in fact remained under the rule of Turkey. As early as in February 1919, the Second Congress of Representatives of the Population of Western Armenia, those who managed to escape the genocide, adopted a resolutions on the necessity to unite Western and Eastern Armenia into a single state. On this basis, on May 28, 1919, the Armenian parliament proclaimed the creation of united and independent Armenia. Thus, the legal rights of the Armenian people on the territory of their historical homeland were declared. In January 1919, the Entente Powers Peace Conference was opened in Paris to work out the terms of peace and conclude peace treaties with the defeated countries. The delegation of the Armenian Republic, headed by Avetis Agaronyan, also went to Paris to participate in the conference. The Armenian National Delegation, headed by Pogos Nubar Pasha, was also in Paris. Established in 1912, it represented the interests of the Armenians of Western Armenia and Cilicia. After the establishment of the Soviet power in Azerbaijan on April 28, 1920, the Armenian Bolsheviks started an armed uprising in May to establish the Soviet power in Armenia as well. In Alexandropol, the Military Revolutionary Council was formed, which announced the seizure of power on May 10, 1920. The army units did not resist the rebels. The Bolsheviks also seized power in Kars, Karakilis, Igdir, Gavar and other cities. Sarkis Musailyan, commander of the armored train named Vardan Zoravar, became the commander of armed forces of the rebels. Amid the political crisis, the Dashnak Tsutyun party formed a new government of Armenia headed by Amazasp Ogajanyan. A state of emergency was imposed. The parliament was temporarily dissolved. Deputies were sent to electoral constituencies to work with the population. A strike group was sent to suppress the uprising. The leadership of the uprising in Alexandropol, having received no help from the Red Army, in a few days, almost without serious battles, laid down their weapons. According to the decision of the military tribunal, the leaders and many participants of the uprising were shot down. The May uprising was defeated due to poor preparation and the lack of the aid of Soviet Russia. The defeat of the uprising further worsened Armenia's external and internal situation. On August 10, 1920, the Allied powers signed a peace treaty with Ottoman Turkey in Sevres, a suburb of Paris. Among the allies, the Treaty of Sevres was also signed by head of the Armenian delegation Avitis Haronyan. Under the Treaty of Sevres, the Allied powers and Ottoman Turkey recognized the Republic of Armenia within the boundaries defined by the US President Woodrow Wilson. The territory of Armenia was defined to cover 150,000 square kilometers with the outlet to the Black Sea. However, the agreement did not stipulate exactly how these areas should be transferred to Armenia. The Allied powers did not undertake any obligation to implement the provisions of the treaty, and the US Congress had already renounced any obligation towards Armenia before that. Meanwhile, Turkey had been undergoing a process of national consolidation since 1990, and a new government had been formed. The National Assembly, headed by Mustafa Kemal in Ankara, declared the Sultan's power overthrown and embarked on a path of struggle with the Entente powers. It refused to recognize the Treaty of Sevres signed by the Sultan's government. Soviet Russia established close relations with the Kemalist government of Turkey and supported its struggle against the Entente powers diplomatically and economically. In order to establish its land border with Turkey, Soviet Russia sought to include the Transcaucasian republics in its sphere of influence. The leadership of the Republic of Armenia failed to show the necessary diplomatic flexibility and correctly navigate these complex international relations. It continued to hope for the assistance and support of the Entente Allied powers in a just solution of the Armenia's territorial problems. Therefore, the Kemalist Turkey regarded Armenia as a hostile country. Until the United States gave up its mandate for Armenia, Turkey was afraid to proceed to open military actions. Kemalist Turkey was also restrained by the position of Soviet Russia, which sought to establish the Soviet power in the Transcaucasian republics and to include the region in its sphere of influence. Part 12. The Second Soviet Republic of Armenia. After the establishment of the Soviet power, the Armenian Republic started to restore the destroyed economy. There was a shortage of food in the country, and famine and epidemics continued. The Turks destroyed and looted the only railway depot in Armenia in Alexandropol. The treasury was empty and the money devaluated. The government, led by Alexander Myasnikan, organized an extraordinary commission for the purchase and distribution of seed wheat. In September 1921, under the leadership of national poet Hovhannes Tumanyan, the Armenian Relief Committee began to function, which organized fundraising for the benefit of the starving population. A charitable aid continued to come in from the American Committee for Relief in the Near East. In 1921, Russia provided Armenia with 3.5 million gold rubles. Ready-made clothes, footwear, medicines, inventory and seed wheat were sent to Armenia. Specialists and equipment were sent to Armenia to restore industrial enterprises. A textile factory was established with the technical assistance of textile workers from the city of Ivanovo. The construction of hydroelectric power plants and irrigation channels began. In 1924, the copper plant in Kapan, which had not functioned since 1916, resumed its work. In the summer of 1922, Armenia began to apply the new economic policy that had already been applied in Soviet Russia and other Soviet republics. By 1928, Armenia's economy as a whole had reached the level of 1913. In 1925, the 14th Congress of the Communist Party adopted a decision to start industrializing the country. It was set to turn the USSR into a country with developed heavy industry. A 5-year development plan of the USSR was developed and approved. A special 5-year plan was developed for Armenia. During the years of the first 5-year plan, 1928-1932, 18 enterprises were put into operation. Yerevan oil pressing factory, a garment factory, a carbide factory. The Yerevan, Leninakan and Droza hydroelectric power plants were put into operation. The construction of Sevan-Razdan energy cascade has started. During the years of the second 5-year plan, 1933-1937, 26 enterprises were put into operation in Armenia: a mining and processing plant in Kapan, chemical plants in Alaverdi and Kirovakan, a cement plant in Davalu. The construction of a rubber plant was initiated in Yerevan. In 1927, the 15th Congress of the Communist Party of the USSR decided to start collectivization of agriculture in parallel with the industrialization. In Armenia, collectivization began in 1928, when the first 55 collective farms were organized. Since 1929, on instructions from Moscow, the general collectivization was launched, and a deadline was set to complete by 1933, that is, by the end of the first 5-year plan. By the end of the second 5-year plan, about 80% of the peasantry in Armenia had been collectivized. There were 1,074 collective farms and 16 state farms, 24 MTS in the country. The general collectivization in Armenia had been brought to an end by 1940. During collectivization, the kulak elements were eliminated. Some of the peasantry joined the ranks of workers, and the agriculture was centralized and put under the state control. One of the first steps of the Soviet power in Armenia was the nationalization of all cultural and educational institutions. In this way, the Soviet power asserted its monopoly in a field of education and culture. Private printing houses, newspapers and magazines were closed. Only the party government press was published. For the promotion and introduction of the communist ideology to the masses, it was important to eliminate the illiteracy. By the decree of the Revolutionary Committee of December 9, 1920, the Armenian language was declared the state language. In September 1921, by a special decree of the government of Armenia, all illiterate and semi-literate people aged 16 to 50 were obligated to learn literacy in their native language. In cities and villages, lickbase centers were organized for the elimination of illiteracy. According to the results of the 1926 population census, there were 200,000 illiterates in Armenia. During the years of 2 5-year plans, a huge work had been done, and by 1940, the number of literate population was already more than 80%. High percentage of illiteracy remained among Azerbaijanis and Kurds living in Armenia. The government paid great attention to the development of school education. Elementary and 7-year schools were organized. Azerbaijani, Russian and Assyrian schools had been opened for national minorities in Armenia. Teacher training college had been opened in Yerevan and other cities, and a pedagogical faculty had been functioning in the state university since 1922. In the course of economic recovery and industrialization, the need for literate workers, engineers and technical workers sharply increased. For this purpose, since 1923, rabfaks, labor schools, were already opened in Armenia, where workers could get a 7-year educational and working specialty attending classes after the work. After 1930, vocational training schools were organized on the basis of rabfaks. In the 20s-30s, the network of higher educational institutions was expanded. Since 1921, the Armenian University became a state university. After historical and legal faculties, new faculties were opened: national sciences, medical, agricultural and pedagogical. In 1940, 9 higher educational institutions with 11,000 students were already functioning in Armenia. Further development was halted due to the war. On June 22, 1941, Fascist Germany attacked the USSR. Hitler planned to defeat the Soviet Union before the onset on winter. All the peoples of the Soviet Union stood up to fight the enemy. Soviet Armenia directed all material and human resources to the fight against the enemy. The national economy was put on the wartime footing. The funds collected by the Armenian people were used to build flying squadrons, tank corps, armored trains, etc. At the beginning of the war, many Armenian divisions were formed, which made a significant contribution to the defeat of the enemy. The most famous of them were 89th and 409th divisions. The 409th division began its combat way from the North Caucasus and ended the war with the battles for the liberation of Austria and Czechoslovakia. The 89th Taman Division covered itself with glory, having fought from the North Caucasus to Berlin. Many Armenians fought in partisan detachments behind enemy lines. 107 sons of the Armenian people, 36 of them posthumously, were awarded the high title of Hero of the Soviet Union, and another 27 were awarded the 3 classes of the Order of Glory. The defender of Leningrad, pilot Nelson Stepanyan, was awarded the title of twice Hero of the USSR. During the war, more than 60 Armenian military leaders were promoted to the ranks of generals: Nver Safarian, Sarkis Martirosyan, Askanas Karapetyan, HAYK Martirosyan, Ivan Vekilov, and others. 4 sons of the Armenian people reached the high rank of the Marshal. Marshal of the Soviet Union, twice Hero of the USSR, Ivan Christoforovich Bagramyan, Admiral of the Fleet, Hero of the USSR, Ivan Stepanovich Isakov, Chief Marshal of Armored Troops, Amazas Phachaturovich Babajanyan, Marshal of the Air Force, Sergei Alexandrovich Khudyakov. After the end of the war, it became necessary to reconverse the economy back on a peaceful path, to develop agriculture in order to provide the population and the demobilized with food. Armenia actively helped to restore the war-torn economies of the Union republics, Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. In the years of 3 post-war 5-year plans, 1946-1960, the Armenian economy had achieved a significant success. In 1949, the construction of copper molybdenum plant began in Kajaran. In 1950, the Yerevan aluminum plant began producing products. Armenia started exporting machine tools, generators, transformers, capacitors, etc. In order to develop the heavy industry, the expansion of the energy base had begun. In 1949, the construction of the Sevan underground hydroelectric power plant was completed, and in 1953, Gyumush HPP in Sevan Razdan Cascade was put into operation. In 1958, a course was taken to transform Armenia into a country of great chemistry. Superphosphate plant in Alaverdi and polyvinyl acetate plant in Yerevan were built. Highways were built, the railway network was expanded. In 1960, the construction of an atomic power station in Armavir began. As early as 1980, the atomic power complex was put into operation and provided electricity not only to Armenia but also to neighboring republics. To save Lake Sevan, the level of which fell twice due to the Sevan Razdan Cascade, a unique 50-kilometer underground channel Arpa Sevan was built in 1961-1981. The development of industry and agriculture in the post-war years created conditions for improving the welfare of the population. At the end of 1947, the food stamp system was lifted off, and the monetary reform was carried out. The daily life and the lifestyle of people began to improve significantly. Radio sets, TV sets, refrigerators, pianos, sewing machines, and other goods appeared. The industrial boom had seriously changed the demographic composition of the Armenian population. The urban population by 1960 was 1/3, and by 1985, 2/3 of the population of the Republic. To provide housing for the urban population had become a necessity. New residential areas were built in Yerevan, Komitas, Zeytun, Arabkir, Achapnyak, and others. However, by the beginning of the 80s, the population of Yerevan had reached 1 million people, and Erebuni, Nork, Davidashen, Ararat, and other residential areas were also built to solve the housing problem. By 1985, the construction of the first line of the Yerevan metro with 5 stations was completed. In 1965, under the leadership of the first secretary of the Communist Party of Armenia, Yakov Zarobyan, it was decided to immortalize the memory of the victims of the genocide by building a special monument. The monument in Tsitsernakaberd, which had been completed in 1967, became a place of the national pilgrimage. In 1968, the 15th anniversary of the victory of the Armenian people in the Battle of Sardarapat was solemnly celebrated. A memorial to the participants of the battle was erected on the site of the battle, and an ethnographic museum was opened. Long periods of peaceful life had a beneficial impact on the development of Armenian culture. At the end of 1921, manuscripts and valuables of Echmiadzin Matenadaran that had been taken away during the World War I were returned to Armenia from Moscow. On this basis, in 1925, the State Scientific Research Institute of Science and Art was established. In 1935, the Armenian branch of the USSR Academy of Sciences was established on the basis of the institute, which became the Academy of Science of Armenia in 1943. Since 1938, the branch was headed by a famous scientist, director of the Hermitage, academician Joseph Orbeli. The Armenian literature experienced a rapid development. The Yegishe Charen's poetic genius flashed. Composers Alexander Spendirian, Romanos Melikyan, and Armen Tigranian made a significant contribution to the development of musical art. In 1932, the Armenian Philharmonic Society was founded. In 1938, the Opera and Ballet Theatre and the National Song and Dance Assembly were founded. In 1922, the Armenian State Drama Theatre was opened in Yerevan. In the early 20s, Armen film was organized. In 1925, the first silent movie Namus was released, and in 1935, the first sound movie Pepo was released, directed by Hamo Beknazarian. In 1924, famous architect Tamanyan drew up the general project for the development of Yerevan. The construction of government buildings, an opera house, residential and public buildings had begun. Talented architects Toromanyan, Halabyan, Safarian and others worked together with Tamanyan. A pleiad of talented scientists had grown up. In 1958, there were 64 scientific institutions operating in Armenia, and by 1985, 90 scientific research institutes had 22,000 research scientists. Through the efforts of Victor Ambartsumyan in 1946, the Burakan Astrophysical Observatory was founded. The Academic Institute of Computing Machines was established under the leadership of Sergei Mergelyan. Archaeological excavation of monuments of the Eurasian and Hellenistic periods were carried out. In 1958, Matenadaran, the Institute of Ancient Manuscripts, moved to a specially constructed building. Today, more than 20,000 manuscripts are stored and studied there. The number of schools and specialized secondary schools was increased. In 1965, the transition to a compulsory secondary education was completed. By the mid-1980s, there were already 13 higher education institutions with 60,000 students operating in Armenia. The network of public libraries, museums, theaters and cinemas was expanded. On November 29, 1957, the Armenian television started broadcasting. Vagram Papazyan, Aram Khatsaturian, Gracian Nersesyan, Havet Avetyan, Gurgen Janivikyan continued to be the stage magicians. New stage names also appeared: Metaxia Simonian, Horen Abramyan, Sos Sarkisyan, Frunzik Makrtchan, Gracia Kaplanyan, Sergei Parajanov shown in cinematography. The films of Frunze Dovlatyan, Henrik Malyan and others had made the Armenian cinema art popular and beloved. The Armenian musical art has reached great heights. Aram Khachaturian showcased new sides of his marvelous talent. He honored to create the first national ballet, Gayane, and what is more, the ballet Spartacus became a classic of ballet art. Composers Arno Babajanyan, Mikhail Tariverdiev, Eduard Mirzoyan, Tigran Mansuryan, Konstantin Orbelyan and many others performed with their talented works. Famous opera singers were Pavel Lisitsyan, Gohar Gasparyan, Tatovik Sazandaryan, Zara Dolukhanova, Lucine Zakarian, Migrant Yerkat, and others. The patriarch of Armenian painting, Martyros Saryan, continued working. The talented painters Minas Avetisyan, Grigor Khanjian, Hovanes Zardaryan, and others promoted rich traditions. Gukas Chubaryan, Ara Harutyunyan and others became famous in sculpture. The talent of Yervand Kochar manifested in his famous sculpture of the epic hero Sasunsi David. The traditions of Armenian art of building continued to develop in architecture. In the 70s and 80s, unique architectural projects such as Razdan Stadium, the Zvartnots Airport, the Sport and Concert Complex, the Yerevan metro stations were implemented in Yerevan. By the mid-80s, the USSR had entered a period of deep crisis. The economy began to stagnate and the real income of the population fell. The need for reforms had become obvious even to the party elite. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev came to power and proclaimed a policy of perestroika and glasnost. However, the attempt to overcome the crisis, controlled from above by semi-measures, failed. The social and economic crisis turned into a political one, and the process of collapse of the USSR began. The interethnic discord and relations between the center and the republics had aggravated. The times of severe trials were again coming for Armenia. Part 13. The Third Republic of Armenia. In the late 80s, the inter-ethnic discord and relations between the center and republics worsened. The Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh was encouraged to believe in the possibility of a just solution to the Karabakh problem. On February 20, 1988, the session of the Regional Council of the NKR, based on the right of nations to self-determination, decided to withdraw the region from Azerbaijan and to join it to Armenia. But Azerbaijani leadership tried to solve Karabakh problem by force. On February 27-29, outbreaks of violence, pogroms against Armenians took place in Sumgait, near Baku. 32 people were massacred, more than 100 of them were wounded, subjected to violence, beatings, and their houses and property were looted. After the Sumgait tragedy, rallies in Armenia broke out with a new force. A Karabakh committee was formed, under whose leadership demonstrations, strikes and hunger strikes began in support of the Karabakh movement. Livon Ter-Petrosyan, Vazgen Manukyan, Babken Ararksyan, Ashot Manucharyan and others took the leadership of the Karabakh Committee. Branches of the committee appeared in almost all enterprises. Since May 1988, new pogroms of Armenians began in Azerbaijan, and they were forcibly expelled from the republic. In response, the persecution of Azerbaijanis living in Armenia also began. By the end of 1988, 300,000 people were evicted from Azerbaijan to Armenia and 90,000 people were evicted from Armenia to Azerbaijan. On December 7, 1988, a 9-point earthquake with the epicenter near the city of Spitak occurred. According to official data, the victims of the earthquake were 25,000 people killed, about 30,000 became disabled, and more than 500,000 were left homeless. 40% of the Republic's territory was destroyed. During these hard days, the majority of the Union Republic's foreign states, many international organizations and the Armenian diaspora provided invaluable assistance to earthquake-stricken Armenia. Charles Aznavour had visited Armenia many times, as well as the wife of President George H.W. Bush, British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, Baroness Caroline Cox, Joseph Riegler and others. All of them brought medicines, medical equipment, products and money from themselves, donations from individuals or governments of their countries. And today, many schools, hospitals, entire city blocks bear the names of the countries, nations and people who helped build them. On December 8, a special state commission headed by the Prime Minister of the USSR, Nikolai Ryzhkov, arrived in a disaster area. Under his direct supervision, the assistance and works to eliminate the consequences of the earthquake were organized. In 1989-1990, about 40,000 specialists from different Union republics came for the restoration work. All those tragic events caused a huge damage to the economy of the republic. Thousands of people were left without jobs. The situation was further aggravated by the fact that since the summer of 1989, Azerbaijan had started a periodic blockade of Armenia. Construction materials for the reconstruction of the disaster zone ceased to enter. NKR also faced problems. The region was completely blocked by Azerbaijan and had only air communication with the outside world. On January 13, 1990, mass pogroms and forced evictions of Armenians began in Baku. The turmoil lasted for more than a week, after which there were no Armenians left in Azerbaijan. The central authorities interfered into the process only when armed groups of the Popular Front of Azerbaijan tried to overthrow the Soviet power, and pogroms of Jews, Russians and others began. Troops were brought into Baku and armed groups were destroyed. In February, armed formations of the Azerbaijani Popular Front launched attacks on border villages and towns of Armenia and Artsakh. Mass cases of captivity of people and exchange of hostage became widespread. In Armenia, militia groups started to be formed spontaneously, who took over the defense of settlements and repelled the attacks of Azerbaijani gangs. Since the summer 1990, the blockade of Armenia had become permanent. In fact, Azerbaijan had launched an undeclared war against Armenia. The idea of secession from the USSR and restoration of state sovereignty had gained more and more supporters in Armenia. On May 20, 1990, elections to the Supreme Council of the Republic were held in Armenia. For the first time, the elections were held in a democratic environment. On August 4, 1990, with the support of the majority of communist deputies, Levon Ter-Petrosyan, a candidate from the AOD, one of the leaders of the Karabakh Committee, was elected chairman of the Supreme Council of Armenia. On August 23 of the same year, the first session of the Supreme Council of Armenia adopted the Declaration of Independence of Armenia. The declaration declared the beginning of the process of independence of Armenia until it obtained full sovereignty. The flag, the emblem, coats of arms, and the anthem of the First Republic were restored. On August 19, 1991, reactionary forces in the USSR attempted to carry out a coup d'etat. Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev was taken into custody at the state villa in Faros, Crimea. Troops were brought to Moscow. The State Committee on the State of Emergency was created. But democratic forces of Russia managed to suppress the putsch and protect democracy. The failure of the putsch further accelerated the process of collapse of the USSR. On September 21, 1991, a referendum was held in Armenia and 94% of the citizens supported the secession from the USSR and the creation of an independent republic. In compliance with the will of the people, on September 23, 1991, the Supreme Council of Armenia declared the independence of the Republic of Armenia. On October 16, 1991, presidential elections were held, and Levon Ter-Petrosyan was elected the first president of the Third Republic of Armenia. In April-May 1991, the army units of Azerbaijan, with the support of the internal troops, conducted Operation Ring. As a result, the Armenian population was forcibly evicted from the Gerashen district and, in summer 1992, from the Shaumian and Mardakert districts. Despite the territorial losses, the population of Artsakh continued their selfless struggle. In fact, there was an undeclared war in the region. After the collapse of the USSR, the Popular Front Party came to power through the election in Azerbaijan. Its leader, Abulfaz Elchibey, was elected president. The leadership of independent Azerbaijan rejected all recommendations of international organizations and relied on resolving the issue by force of arms. The attempt of the President of Russia and Kazakhstan to mediate a peaceful settlement was rejected by Azerbaijan. A large-scale war was launched against Artsakh and Armenia. Artsakh was completely surrounded, and the Azerbaijani army subjected its capital Stepanakert and other settlements to artillery and missile fire. During the bombing, there were numerous victims among the civilian population. The self-defense forces of Artsakh took decisive actions against the Azerbaijani army and turned the situation in the opposite direction. On May 9, 1992, they liberated Shusha, the ancient capital of Artsakh. The Azerbaijani troops were driven back from the borders of the republic thanks to the NKR Defense Army, volunteers from Armenia and the Armenian diaspora, who immediately came to Nagorno-Karabakh and defended the homeland with weapons in their hands. During the Karabakh War, thousands of Armenians from different countries of the world returned to their homeland and joined the ranks. Here we must remember those who distinguished themselves in the battles of 1991-1994 with their extraordinary courage. That is, about heroes, in the sense that humanity had put into this concept since the immemorial, such as the heroes of Artsakh: Vladimir Balayan, Naira Saakyan, Shusha Fox, Valery Vardanyan, The Scar, Samvel Babayan, Samo, Arkady Tertatevosyan, Commando, Ashot Gulyan, Bekor, Karo Karketjan, Spitak Arch, Monte Melkonyan, Avo, Petros Gevonyan, Peto, Jirair Sefilyan, Vardan Stepanyan, Dushman, Vazgen Sarkisyan, Sparapet, Simon Achigozyan, Grandfather, Arkady Zakharyan, Murisheni Ago, Ivan Lalayan, Vanik, Samvel Karapetyan, Oganov Samo, and many, many others. On May 18, Azerbaijani formations were driven out of Lachin district. Lachin corridor was created, thus the blockade was broken and Artsakh established contacts with Armenia. Defeats led to a political crisis in Azerbaijan. One of the commanders of the military units, Surat Husseinov, raised a revolt against the government. The government was overthrown and President Elchibey fled. The experienced communist leader Heydar Aliyev came to power. Convinced that it was impossible to solve the Karabakh problem by force, the Aliyev government went to a truce in July 1994. Through the intermediary of Russia, an agreement was concluded between Armenia and Azerbaijan on the cessation of hostilities. Under the auspices of the OSCE, peace talks between Azerbaijan and Armenia on the Karabakh issue have begun and are continuing to this day. In 1996, elections were held in Artsakh. Robert Kocharyan was elected president of Artsakh. Subsequently, Arkady Gukasyan replaced him in his post in 1999, and in August 2007, as a result of scheduled elections, Bako Saakyan was elected the third president of NKR. Armenia around the turn of the third millennium. To bring the country's economy out of the crisis, the transition to a market economy had become an urgent necessity. In 1991-1992, almost 80% of agricultural land was transferred to peasants working on it. Due to it, about 320,000 individuals and collective peasants' farms were created. In November 1993, the government put in circulation its own coin, Armenian dram. With the ongoing economic crisis, the dram quickly devaluated. The main causes of the socio-economic crisis were the collapse of the USSR and the termination of economic relations, the earthquake of 1988, and the blockade by Turkey and Azerbaijan. The most important guarantee of Armenians' independence and security was the creation of a combat-capable national army. Under the leadership of the Minister of Defense Vazgen Sarkisyan, by devoted efforts of the career officers and field commanders, a combat-capable national army with modern weapons was created in a short period of time. The social and political life of the country developed in a democratic way. On July 5, 1995, as a result of the referendum, the Constitution of Independent Armenia was adopted, according to which Armenia became a presidential parliamentary republic. The head of the state is the president, who is elected in general elections for a 5-year term. The highest body of legislative power is the National Assembly, and the highest body of executive power is the government of the Republic of Armenia. The President appoints the Prime Minister and, on his recommendations, ministers. On December 1, 1995, the law on new administrative territorial divisions of the Republic of Armenia was adopted. According to this law, the territory of the Republic consisted 10 regions, mazes, the city of Yerevan, which had the status of a region, and communities. The first years of Armenians' independence were the hardest. The creative and scientific elite was leaving the country. During 1990-1995, the number of scientific workers decreased almost 4 times, from 22,000 to 5,500. People went to Russia, the United States, and European countries in search of a livelihood and the use of their potential. During the energy crisis, the population received only 1-2 hours of electricity per day. A card system was introduced for bread and other food products. In 1993-1995, Armenia was forced to turn to loan of about $5 million to purchase the Russian oil and agricultural products. In September 1996, the second presidential elections were held in Armenia, the result of which were falsified. Levon Ter-Petrosyan was elected president for the second term. The elections were held with great violations and under the pressures from security ministries. Disappointed in their expectations, masses of people stormed the parliament building, entered inside by force, protesting against election fraud. In early 1998, President Levon Ter-Petrosyan was forced to resign. Pre-term presidential elections were held in Armenia. The main struggle took place between Prime Minister Robert Kocharyan and former communist leader Karen Demircan. Robert Kocharyan was elected second president of Armenia in April 1998. Armenia gradually began to emerge from the crisis. The domestic politics had normalized. Internal political democracy was restored again. The prosecution of the Dashnak party was closed and political prisoners were released from prisons. Since 1998, the education system had been reformed, for which the World Bank had allocated $15 million. In 1991, the American University of Armenia was founded with the support of the University of California in Yerevan. In 1999, the Russian Armenian Slavonic University was opened in Yerevan. In 2000, the French University of Armenia was founded. In the summer of 1999, Karen Demircan was elected Speaker of the Parliament and Vazgen Sarkisyan headed the government. The domestic political and the international situation was improving. However, the normal course of the events was interrupted by a new crisis. On October 27, 1999, an armed group of extremists broke into the parliament building and shot the leadership of the parliament and government at point-blank range. Karen Demircan, Vazgen Sarkisyan and 7 other people were killed. It took several months for life to return to normal, and the crisis was overcome. The trial of the terrorists lasted for more than 2 years, and in 2003 almost all of them were sentenced to life imprisonment, since the capital punishment was abolished in Armenia. Since May 2000, the government of the country had been headed by Andranik Markaryan, the chairman of the Republican Party. Armenia became a member of WTO. Russia, the USA, and other countries continue to provide a financial assistance to Armenia. Aluminium, molybdenum and gold are extracted from local raw materials. The production of computer technologies and their software was being organized. In August-September 2001, solemn events were held to celebrate the anniversary of 1,700,000 of years of the adoption of Christianity as the state religion. The celebrations were attended by Pope John Paul II. In the presidential elections in February-March, President Robert Kocharyan won again and was re-elected for a second term. In the parliamentary elections, the Republican Party bloc ARF-Dashnak and Orinats Yerkir won. On February 19, 2008, regular presidential elections were held in Armenia. 6 candidates were running for this post. Serge Sargsyan was elected the third president of the Republic of Armenia. Candidate Livonte Petrosyan, former president of Armenia, and his supporters refused to accept the results of the elections. 10 days after the elections, opposition rallies continued on Theatre Square. Early in the morning of March 1, 2008, the police began to protect Theatre Square from demonstrations. The unrest started in Yerevan, which turned into a mass protest rally towards the evening. Weapons were used. 10 people were officially dead, but the number of wounded could not be recorded. The history will still give its assessment of those tragic events, and the perpetrators will be justly punished. In 2015, the ruling RPA party in Armenia, headed by its leader and president Serge Sargsyan, initiated constitutional reforms aimed at replacing the presidential rule with a parliamentary model. Opponents of strengthening the power of the prime minister linked this reform to the personality of the third president of the Republic of Armenia, Serge Sargsyan, who in spring 2018 was completing his second term of office and, according to the constitution of the country, had to leave the power. Some experts, however, were inclined to believe that Armenians' transition from a presidential rule to a parliamentary system was due to objective political reasons of internal and external nature. Despite the objective costs of the administration of the president Serge Sargsyan, there is no denying that during the years of his rule he had undertaken a number of serious initiatives in the field of foreign policy, such as Armenia's accession to the Customs and Eurasian Economic Union, with the simultaneous conclusion of a comprehensive agreement with the European Union. In the same context, under Serge Sargsyan, Armenia continued its active military, political and military technical cooperation with the CSTO and developed equally useful contacts with NATO. It was essential to recall that Serge Sargsyan is the only leader of a foreign country who managed to receive the Iskander-M operational and tactical complex from Russia. Armenia's military and technical partnership with Russia continued to develop under his leadership. Armenia and Russia had created a joint air defense and a united group alignment. Unfortunately, the rule of Serge Sargsyan was not without serious internal political crisis: the events of Electromaidan, the mutiny of the Sasnats Rare Group. However, the main miscalculations were in the field of economic and social policy, namely the growth of the country's foreign debt, which at the end of the 2008 was slightly over $1.5 billion, and by the end of 2017 reached the level of $5.4 billion. If considering that today the level of external debt is approaching 60% of the country's GDP, the situation in this regard is really alarming. There is also a severe situation in the social sphere. If in 2008 the population of Armenia, according to official data, was 3,097,300 people, then at the beginning of this year this figure sank to 2,972,900. In other words, over the past 10 years, the population of Armenia decreased by almost 125,000 people. This event perhaps may be placed into a category of the most significant losses of the country in recent years. But very likely, the April of 2016 had become a real ordeal. It will remain a black page in the modern history of Armenia. The 4-day war, more precisely, its results, are still being brought as a charge against Serge Sargsyan. Those 4 days claimed the lives of hundreds of soldiers and officers. Have all things been done to avoid that? The history will judge, but it is obvious that the commander-in-chief bears full responsibility. The election to the Armenian parliament and the subsequent approval by the Parliament of the Republic of Armenia in 2018 of the candidacy of Sargsyan, who repeatedly promised not to place his name in nomination, became the final straw that exhausted people's patience. The Prime Minister of Armenia, Sir Sargsyan, had resigned after less than 7 days in office. Thus, the main demand of the participants of the 11-day-long mass protests of thousands of numbers in Yerevan and other Armenian cities calling for Sargsyan to leave office was fulfilled. The resignation of Sir Sargsyan ended a decade-long drama that began on the same squares in Yerevan in 2008. As a result of the Velvet Revolution in Armenia, Sir Sargsyan and his government resigned, and opposition leader Nikol Pashinyan became Prime Minister. The new government may initiate the beginning of the Fourth Republic of Armenia if it starts systemic transformations in the country in all spheres of life. Armenia has all the necessary chances and potential for that.